Chapter 2188. Hee. Chu Fei immediately grinned proudly. However, a sudden heart-wrenching pain made him curse, "Damn little sheep. I will remember this for now. I will get my revenge in the future. I think it will be very difficult." Jing Wuming looked in the direction Chu Yang left and said, "I feel that he is getting further and further away from us." Chu Fei was stunned. Then, he smiled bitterly and scolded Jing Wuming, "How can he be further away from you? He is not a sage yet. I am the only one who can't see his shadow. I am so lame. Being a sage doesn't mean anything." After hearing Jing Wuming's point of view, Chu Fei couldn't help but retract his smile. This time, he wasn't the only one who felt Shangguan Xiao's oppression. Chu Yang would definitely go through a drastic change. Jing Wuming also felt that Chu Yang was no longer the same as before. The crowd dispersed and gathered again. Chu Yang was oppressed, despised, humiliated, angry, wild, and crazy. Then, he became quiet, depressed, and finally, he became playful and happy. Not many people could see everything from the beginning to the end. Qianzi and Venomous Snake from the Dark Thorn. These two people were just right. They carefully hid their identities and blended into the crowd. They saw everything and remembered it in their hearts. Chu Yang was the last to leave. They also left. When they reached a safe place, Qianzi stopped and looked at the towering ancient trees in front of him and the rolling mountains in the distance. He said faintly, "Venomous Snake, do you think that dog can fulfill his arrogant words?" Only Chu Yang could make a great emperor kneel down and make a great emperor unreachable. In the East Continent, only one person could say such crazy words. Venomous Snake stood in the shadow of a towering ancient tree. He really looked like a lurking venomous snake. Hearing this, he frowned and recalled everything that had happened before. He wasn't sure. He felt that Chu Yang could, but he also felt that Chu Yang couldn't. "Perhaps if I ask you this, you won't have any doubts." Qianzi's faint gaze involuntarily froze at this moment. His expression also became extremely solemn. His voice was unusually heavy as he said, "That dog's big brother said that he was very childish in dealing with the conflict with Shangguan Xiao. Do you agree? Is that dog really that childish? Wasn't this self-evident?" Viper was stunned as he stared blankly at Qianzi. "I don't think that dog is childish. Instead, I think it's a sign of maturity and wisdom." Qianzi couldn't help but reveal a worried expression. Amidst this worry, there was even a hint of fear. Viper was stunned once again. For the first time, he sensed Qianzi's fear. This had never happened before. "Why do I think so?" Qianzi sorted out his previous experience and his thoughts finally became clear. The reason why everyone thinks that he's childish is because other than his childishness, no one sees his honesty, courage, and fearlessness. These words were hard to understand, but Viper completely understood. This was because he knew Qianzi too well. Honesty. Chu Yang was honest with Shangguan Xiao and his fiancée. Fearlessness. Even if Chu Yang was misunderstood by his fiancée and his fiancée's friends and family, he wasn't afraid. At the same time, he created a facade to make everyone think that he's very childish and an easy opponent. They forgot about his various shocking methods in the East Continent. In this way, apart from mocking him, his enemies in the Central Continent will foolishly fall into his trap one by one. Chapter 2189. The Central Continent's great Emperor Shangguan Xiao had brought a group of veterans to Violet Qi Eastern Courtyard to oppress Chu Yang. This was naturally a major event for the Eastern Continent. The final result had left many people disappointed. Chu Yang had not died. For those who harbored ill intentions, the process and the final result were shocking. Some of them were alarmed upon hearing the news, and their reverence for Chu Yang grew even greater, extinguishing the flames that had burned in their hearts. There were also some who were ecstatic and itching to make their move. The Central Continent's intervention had given them hope. From different perspectives, one would obtain different understandings, and the final reactions would also be different. The only thing that could be confirmed was that the Eastern Continent was becoming more and more stable. The people of the Eastern Continent discovered that as long as they did not attack, enslave, slaughter, or humiliate the people of the Eastern Wilderness, even if they cursed the people of the eastern wilderness, they would not be slaughtered by Chu Yang. They would only be provoked by the people of the eastern wilderness. In this period of time, because of these conflicts, countless people of the eastern wilderness had sworn oaths or made bets with the people of the eastern continent. But none of this was important. The most important thing was that the people of the eastern continent had confirmed that Chu Yang had no intention of enslaving them. As a result, the eastern continent was becoming more and more peaceful, more and more stable. In addition, the people of the eastern continent were not the only ones concerned about Chu Yang. There were also many people in the central continent who were concerned about the matter between Chu Yang and Shangguan Xiao. Many people in the central continent quickly learned about everything that had happened between Shangguan Xiao and Chu Yang. Among these people from the central continent, some felt that Chu Yang's naivety was laughable, and they sneered with disdain. Some focused on the emperor weapon, the demonic bell. They wanted to find out what kind of secrets Chu Yang had, and what kind of hidden cards he had. After Shangguan Xiao returned to the central continent, he reported everything to Duke Ju. Duke Ju immediately said, "This little bastard is truly sharp. He already knew that I was paying attention to him." Those words seemed to contain many meanings, but Shangguan Xiao was unable to comprehend them at all. He voiced the doubts in his heart, but Duke Ju didn't answer him at all. In addition, after Shangguan Xiao came back, he was almost restless. Under the instructions of Shangguan Lan, the parrot cursed Shangguan Xiao in different ways. The parrot's cursing ability shocked the Shangguan family, and Shangguan Xiao even had the thought of strangling the parrot to death. Of course, he also knew that he had almost killed Chu Yang, so his niece hated him to death in her heart. Many things were happening, and many things were brewing. Everyone had their own plans, and everyone had their own preparations. Chu Yang was naturally one of them, in the most central region of the Purple Qi East Courtyard. This area was rich in heaven and earth spirit qi and was shrouded by rolling spirit fog. Within it, the surging spiritual qi of heaven and earth was surging. Sometimes it was like a howling wind, sometimes it was like a surging river, converging towards a lush mountain peak. The lush mountain peak wasn't very tall, but it was still extremely majestic. The mountain was extremely huge, like a black tortoise curled up in the mountain range. After sleeping for a long time, the mountain rocks covered its body. At the peak of the mountain range, there were many green lotus stone platforms. With the green lotus stone platforms as the center, numerous spirit veins converged, followed by surging spiritual qi. This place used to be the place with the richest spiritual qi in the sky courtyard, and a saint-level array was set up here. Chapter 2190. This slender figure was naturally Chu Yang. After Shangguan Xiao left, Chu Yang had basically been in seclusion here. He had already ignited his divine fire, his primordial spirit, godhead, body, and so on had all been calcined. In the heavenly soul world, Chu Yang could break through to the nirvana realm at any time. Because his body and soul had already been tempered by the divine fire, when he activated the nirvana flame, it wouldn't affect them at all. Breaking through to the nirvana realm was just a matter of a snap of his fingers. However, this wasn't what he needed. After igniting the divine fire, Chu Yang couldn't experience the process. He lacked such an important understanding of the martial path, and he had to make up for it. Otherwise, it would have a great impact on his future. Therefore, Chu Yang could only completely hide his cultivation in the heavenly soul world. He lowered his body, soul, and so on to the level before the divine fire calcined him. Then, he slowly activated the nirvana flame, calcined himself, and comprehended the nirvana tribulation bit by bit. The laws he imprinted in his body were like dry firewood. As long as it came in contact with a spark, it would burn fiercely and burn him to ashes. Therefore, this process was very difficult. The reason why it was difficult and not dangerous was because there was a solid foundation, the cultivation of the heavenly soul world. On this foundation, he continued to experiment and comprehend. Gradually, he discovered the secret behind it, nirvana. The first thing to undergo nirvana wasn't his body or soul, but his laws. After the laws underwent nirvana, his body and soul would undergo nirvana, and he would be able to smoothly pass this tribulation and completely enter the nirvana realm. The reason why Chu Yang's Nirvana realm was dangerous was because his laws were too complete and too strong. The transformation was too difficult, and the tribulation fire was incomparably terrifying. The tribulation fire's terror was deeply felt by him when he ignited the divine fire. After finding the reason, Chu Yang made the rules thicker and tougher bit by bit. In the end, he made them undergo a metamorphosis. Bit by bit, it took him an entire month to transform all the laws in his body. This was the 30th day. Peng. Chu Yang sat cross-legged on the green lotus stone platform, making his final attempt. With a thought, clusters of flames suddenly sprang out from the 3,650 pores all over his body. All the acupoints in his body were ignited, and raging flames burst out from inside and outside, beginning to burn his body. He didn't want to immediately break through to the Nirvana realm. Instead, he wanted to confirm whether his body and spirit could withstand the burning of the Nirvana flames after a month of cultivation and completely drawing out the Nirvana flames. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to have become the heart of the flames, wrapped and burned by the surging tribulation flames. Hiss. In just an instant, the intense burning pain caused him to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. Then, the flesh on his body began to burn, and the smell of burnt flesh began to spread. Is it still not working? Within a short period of time, Chu Yang seemed to have been burned into black charcoal. His flesh was burnt in many places. Because he was enduring the intense pain, his face was distorted, and his body was convulsing. Let's try again. If the injuries are too serious, I can only consume the saint's origin to heal. Because of the support of the saint's origin, Chu Yang gritted his teeth and persevered. He felt that the tribulation fire was just like that. The burning of his body should have reached its limit. As for the saint essences, he still had 7 saint essences left, which he had obtained from killing 7 of the 10 saints. The saint essences of the 2 saints from the Star Combat Academy and the 2 saints from the Gongsun family were almost completely depleted. Chapter 2191. Time passed silently. Chu Yang's entire body was fiery red. He looked like a human-shaped iron block. There was a faint appearance of molten iron flowing out of his body. His 7 orifices spewed out flames. One after another, tongues of flames whizzed out of his pores. The crackling sound of the flames was incessant. However, the temperature of the flames seemed to be insufficient. They still couldn't melt this piece of iron. This is indeed the limit. Then, there shouldn't be a problem when it comes to burning my spirit. Bang! It was as if a super strong wind had extinguished the flames. The tribulation fire on Chu Yang's body was like little mice that crawled back into his body. After it was completely extinguished, his charred body was exposed. Whoosh! The saint-level array under the green lotus stone platform was activated. The rolling spiritual energy in the world swept over like a gust of wind and entered Chu Yang's body. Immediately, his body was filled with mist, and a rainbow light shone out. After an hour, Chu Yang's injuries were completely healed. With a rumble, the 5 hells mother-child heavenly demon cauldron rushed out of his body. Kuan Kuan, I'll leave it to you. Chu Yang continued to close his eyes and carefully feel and comprehend. The ice Kuan appeared and took out the 7 saints' origins. It was as if it was holding 7 suns. Buzz! Buzz! The ice Kuan Kuan injected 2 saints' origins into the mother cauldron of the 5 hells mother-child heavenly demon cauldron, while the 5 child cauldrons each had 1 saint's origin. Immediately, 1 big cauldron and 5 small cauldrons vibrated with a buzzing sound. Balls of dazzling saint light burst out. Thick lines of Tao marks on the cauldrons kept interweaving, as if they were weaving a huge heavenly net. Pop! 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 Holy aura kept spreading out from the 6 cauldrons, rippling out circles of void ripples that spread out in all directions. The sound of the great path also began to resound. Golden lotuses, divine flowers, and other strange phenomena began to appear. The saint-level aura swept out, and the entire purple Qi Eastern courtyard seemed to have sensed it. In an instant, countless gazes swept toward Chu Yang. However, they couldn't sense anything. They could only make all kinds of guesses and discuss. The 5 hells mother-child heavenly demon cauldron was a sacred artifact to begin with, but it had been destroyed and remodeled in the past. It lacked a sacred artifact's origin, so it had fallen in rank. Now that it had been replenished, it could immediately be promoted to a sacred artifact. However, Chu Yang's saint's origin had been completely consumed. His heart ached. Without the saint's essence to continue pushing the 100 heavenly grotto heavens, allowing the laws to continuously evolve and be derived, he would be stuck at the nirvana realm if he relied solely on his cultivation. However, he had no choice. He had to do this. To do a good job, one must first sharpen his tools. Before leaving the East Continent for the Central Continent, Chu Yang had one more thing to do: fishing. Chu Yang was fishing. Those who were willing to take the bait. He was going to the Central Continent without the monarch weapon, the demonic bell. Was there anyone who dared to kill him? This was a game between Chu Yang and the hidden enemy. He had given the hidden enemy a chance, and now it was up to them to weigh the pros and cons. Such a plan was actually very obvious. Chu Yang couldn't hide it even if he wanted to, so he might as well directly reveal it. To tell the truth, Chu Yang was still very worried. For example, Chen Zi. After Chen Zi disappeared, he hadn't appeared again. Jing Wuming, Sima Jian, and the others searched for him, but they couldn't find any trace of Chen Zi. This made him even more worried. Besides Chen Zi, Chu Yang also believed that there were many hidden enemies in the East Continent, waiting for an opportunity to strike a fatal blow. Chu Yang actually didn't know if he could catch any fish. On the second day, the saint child Zither Melody rushed over from the Gongsun clan. The Silver Wolf also rushed over from the Stardo Academy. Sixth granduncle, Wang Bushang, and the others from the Baron village all rushed over. After that, the Purple Qi Eastern Courtyard was bustling with noise and excitement. Imperceptibly, the news that Chu Yang was going to the Central Continent spread. Immediately, many people began to secretly monitor Chu Yang, wanting to firmly grasp onto Chu Yang's whereabouts. After 3 days, the celebration in the Purple Qi Eastern Courtyard ended. Chu Fei, Jing Wuming, and the others sent Chu Yang off. Seeing this scene, many spies in the dark immediately transmitted the news back. Chapter 2192. Yellow clouds cover 1,000 miles in broad daylight, the north wind blows wild geese and snow. Don't worry about not having friends on the road ahead. Who in the world doesn't know you? Chu Yang didn't feel sad about leaving for Zhongzhou. The saint child of Zither Melody slowly recited this poem. Such a poem was naturally written by Chu Yang. It was used to despise the saint child of Zither Melody and fully prove that they were literate. As soon as the saint child of Zither Melody finished reciting, he immediately said, "Who are you calling illiterate? Although it's dusk, there are no yellow clouds swept by thousands of miles of yellow sand. There's no north wind or snow." He really tried his best to pretend to be ignorant. Chu Fei laughed when he heard this. It's strange that that little sheep is literate. I know his background. He was Chu Yang's elder brother. Haha. The Silver Wolf couldn't help but laugh. Senior brother, if he wasn't like this, he wouldn't be my senior brother. This is the demeanor of our generation. That makes sense. The saint child of Zither Melody couldn't help but laugh. Even Jing Wuming, who was like a walking corpse, couldn't help but smile. Humph, I knew you would despise him so much. The sudden voice scared them. Immediately, a light tablet emerged from the ground, showing Chu Yang's disdainful face. Do you know what it means to be talented? I don't care if you don't have a farewell poem when I leave. I made a world-famous farewell poem, but you don't know how to appreciate it. Sad, it's really sad. There are always illiterates who despise me. Chu Yang looked up at the sky with his hands clasped behind his back, as if he was speechless. He said sadly, I heard that Zhongzhou is a little literate. I'm really worried about the future of illiterates like you. Forget it, I'll take you to class next. After Chu Fei and the others were speechless for a while, they mostly looked at Chu Yang's smug expression. The first 2 sentences were written in the boundless layers of dark clouds, which had already covered the entire sky. Even the sun appeared dim and yellow, losing its light. There were only flocks of wild geese in formation, hurriedly moving south in the autumn and winter when the north wind blew and the heavy snow swirled in the air. In such a desolate place, It is very easy for me to make you sad. Therefore, I can only comfort you. Therefore, the tone of this poem is clear and healthy, telling you that there is no need to worry. Who in the world does not know such a heaven-defying martial artist like me? In addition, not only do we have high praise for our own character and talents, but we also have sincere wishes for your future prospects. It's really rare for a farewell poem to be written in such a bold and upbeat manner. I'm indeed a genius. I'm only 10 meters tall. In the end, when Chu Fei and the others heard the last part, the silver wolf couldn't help but say, "My senior brother is really shameless." However, his power has obviously regressed, and he praised himself for failing. Waha, this wolf is about to surpass him. Little brother, I've long been prepared. It was rare for Jing Wuming to say such a sentence, which immediately made Chu Fei and Saint Child Zither Melody stunned. Then, they couldn't help but nod. They knew a little about the central continent. Martial arts were naturally prevalent and was the absolute mainstream. However, poetry, calligraphy, painting, and articles were also very popular. It was also a kind of culture. Although it was still inferior to martial arts, if one was proficient in martial arts and knew how to dance with words, their status would be higher and they would be able to look down on martial artists, saying that they were just a bunch of idiots who couldn't read. Generally speaking, literature symbolized a kind of civilization in the central continent. It was a person of culture, a person of high status. Those martial artists who didn't know how to dance with words would easily be looked down upon and disdained by those martial artists who wore a layer of literature, and they would be defined as low-level people. Damn it, the people of the central continent are really hypocritical. They have so many tricks up their sleeves. They're trying to show off their nobility, but they've forcefully added in so many bullshit things. Chapter 2193. Haha. Chu Fei and Saint Child Chinyan couldn't help but laugh. Then, Chu Fei burst out, "What's there to be afraid of? According to the little sheep, he's proficient in everything. Writing brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone are nothing." "That's right." Saint Child Chinyan nodded in agreement. "In the future, when we go back, we'll just have to do a little writing." Little Sheep only had to struggle for a while, and she came up with a very awesome poem. How can we be inferior to others? Jing Wuming couldn't help but nod. He had to admit that literary skills were an extremely important reason why the Central Prefecture looked down on the East Prefecture and other prefectures. If one didn't know how to do some writing and ink, he would be despised and mocked as a country bumpkin in the Central Prefecture. Easy for you to say. The silver wolf thought of writing, drawing, and showing off his poems. He instantly felt a headache coming on. He roared, "My senior brother's little sheep is not an ordinary little sheep. He's a sheep that eats tigers and swallows dragons. You all think too highly of yourselves. This wolf promises that you will soon understand how painful it is to understand." Whether it was Chu Fei, Saint Child Chinyan, or Jing Wuming, they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. This was true. A little sheep couldn't be measured by common sense. If one used a little sheep as an analogy, they would probably die miserably. It's really stressful to have such a younger brother. I can't even be an illiterate. Chu Fei was extremely depressed. When he thought about that poem, drawing, and that bullshit essay, he also felt a headache coming on. He hadn't been able to catch up in terms of martial arts. There was still a huge hole to fill in terms of literary skills. The task was really too difficult. Damn it, really damn it. Saint Child Chinyan also frowned. If one day, the little sheep is awe-inspiring and talented, and his name shakes the Central Prefecture, won't we, as his big brothers, be highlighted? The word illiterate will definitely be used. Mockery and ridicule will be like a tidal wave. Jing Wuming imagined the scene, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. He suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Little brother, I'll go take a look at those left behind. In any case, your cultivation realms are still too low. You can't care about Wen Dao yet." Chu Fei was dumbfounded. Jing Wuming had actually spouted so much nonsense and even explained the reason. After he came back to his senses, he shouted, "I said that, dead man, I'm the little sheep's brother. I should be the one to get rid of the title of illiterate first." Bullshit. Jing Wuming immediately restrained Chu Fei and gave him a good beating. Then, he said, the level of illiteracy is a little too high. You should get rid of the title of weakling first. Chu Fei even had the intention to kill. After being beaten by Chu Yang and Jing Wuming, he wanted to get rid of the suffering of illiteracy. Only then did he realize that he was still struggling bitterly in the suffering of weakling. Life was extremely difficult. I want to be the second to get rid of illiteracy. Yes, that's it, the Silver Wolf said, feeling very good. Bullshit. Chu Fei and Saint Child Chinyan immediately scolded, Wolf Cub, you can't even read big words. You have the nerve to be the second to get rid of illiteracy. Go to the back and line up properly. Bullshit. The Silver Wolf was furious. Who said that I can't read big words? You guys are a classic example of slander, isn't it just waving around literature and playing with ink? Why are you guys so black-hearted? Go against your conscience and say such vicious words. So shameless. Have you asked for my opinion? Bang, bang, bang. The three of them soon started fighting. Each of them cursed and swore, making the followers behind them all dumbfounded. Chu Fei, Saint Child Chinyan, Jing Wuming, and the Silver Wolf all felt great pressure. Among them, Jing Wuming was slightly better. The other three felt that Chu Yang had left them too far behind. Chapter 2194. To them, Chu Yang was not only a pioneer, but also a role model. If Chu Yang could do it, why couldn't they? Even if they were not as excellent as Chu Yang, they could still fall behind. At least, Chu Fei and the others hoped that when they attended Chu Yang's wedding in Zhengzhou State, they could stand upright and not be looked down upon. Of course, this was on the premise that Chu Yang could gain a firm foothold in Zhengzhou State. This was almost a fait accompli for them. At most, it was a matter of time. They had absolute confidence in Chu Yang. At dusk, Looking Dragon City, in the direction of Zhengzhou State, Looking Dragon City was the last city in the East Continent. The meaning of the dragon was noble and supreme. In the 3 words of Looking Dragon City, the dragon referred to Zhengzhou State. The meaning of Looking Dragon City was generally to look up to Zhengzhou State, reflecting the great desire of Zhengzhou State. Looking Dragon City was a down-and-out family in Zhengzhou State. Unable to survive in Zhengzhou State, they were finally forced to leave Zhengzhou State and come to the East Continent. Later, they established Looking Dragon City, which was the meaning of the 3 words Looking Dragon City and the meaning of reviving the family and returning to Zhengzhou State again. This family was the Beigong family, the dominator of Looking Dragon City. Everyone in Looking Dragon City knew about it, and no one dared to underestimate its strength in the East Continent. However, it did not actively participate in the competition of the East Continent, so it was not famous, but its strength was definitely not weak. However, in recent years, the power of the Beigong family had begun to infiltrate the entire East Continent. The leader of the Sky Academy was surnamed Beigong, and he was also a member of the Beigong family. Therefore, the Beigong family's infiltration in the East Continent was actually much earlier than people knew. At dusk, in Zephyr. The afterglow of dusk shone on a long stone street in Looking Dragon City. There was no one on the street. At the end of the stone street, there was an empty house. 9 new flagpoles were erected in front of the door, fluttering in the wind. At dusk, a group of people riding on tall horses suddenly charged into the originally deathly silent flagstone street, breaking the deathly stillness of this place. The horses' hooves trampled on the stone street, like the rain hitting the window, and the thunder of war drums. The 9 burly men on the horses were all dressed in tight clothes, and they all had crimson-red hair that draped over their shoulders like flames. Among the 9 people, some were tall, some were short, some were fat, and some were thin, but their expressions were almost the same. Their faces were stern, especially the leader. His eyes seemed to be burning with ambition. His gaze was like fire, very aggressive. He wore a large gold earring on his left ear and carried a dog's head in his left hand. The group of 9 rode their horses forward at lightning speed. They arrived at the end of the stone street in an instant and stopped in front of a house. The leader threw the dog's head in his hand, and it immediately hung on the first flagpole. Afterwards, this group of people spurred their horses and left. Like a streak of crimson flames, they quickly disappeared into the boundless twilight. After a short period of time, another handsome white-faced young man arrived. He held a large dog in his hand and flew over. When he saw that there was already a dog's head hanging on the flagpole, he smiled and threw the large dog in his hand. Ha ha! The pale-faced young man laughed heartily and left, leaving the big dog barking on the flagpole alone. Dusk passed quickly, and night fell quietly. After those two groups of people, no one else came to the house. It was not until night fell that a middle-aged man in a blue robe appeared again. He lived like a prince, and his face was fair. He was even more elegant and graceful. His pair of eyes shone brightly, like two magic lamps in the night, illuminating the surroundings. As soon as he arrived, he saw that there was only one dog's head on the 9 flagpoles. There was also a large dog barking. He could not help but frown. Only 2 of the 9 families came? Because of this, he was very dissatisfied. After frowning and thinking for a while, he said, "It seems that the deterrent power of that wild dog really can't be underestimated." Chapter 2195. The night was deeper and darker. There were no stars or moon, and the clouds were dark and the wind was strong. On this extremely empty stone street, only the house at the end of the street was brightly lit. The other places were all swallowed by the dark beasts. In the main hall of the house, there was already a table of sumptuous food and wine. The middle-aged man in blue was humming in a low voice, leisurely pouring and drinking by himself. He was very happy. When he raised his wine cup again, his eyebrows twitched, and then a smile appeared on his fair face. "I've long heard that City Lord Bai of the City of Raging Fire is very generous. Since you're already here, why don't you come in and have a drink with me?" An owl-like loud laughter immediately sounded from outside the main hall. Immediately, a black shadow shot over like an arrow. After which, like a white cloud, it gently floated and steadily landed on the opposite side of the blue-clothed middle-aged man. This person had a head of red hair, a lion's nose, a wide mouth, and a big golden ring on his left ear. This person was City Lord Bai of the City of Raging Fire that the middle-aged man in blue had mentioned. The City of Raging Fire was also a city in the East Continent. Like Looking Dragon City, it was also controlled by a family, the Bai family of the City of Raging Fire. The current head of the Bai family was Bai Ziliang. As soon as Bai Ziliang arrived, although the aura of a saint was restrained, there were still flames burning in his eyes. At first glance, the middle-aged man in blue immediately saw ambition and greed, so he was immediately relieved. "Are you Beigong Buwang of the Beigong family?" The middle-aged man in blue smiled gently, cupped his fists, and said, "I am Beigong Buwang. I've been waiting for City Lord Bai for a long time." Bai Ziliang laughed again, and his strange owl-like laughter resounded throughout the house. "Brother Beigong, only the 2 of us have the courage to kill dogs. Are we the only heroes in the East Continent? Bai Ziliang, who are you laughing at?" Suddenly, a sarcastic voice pierced in from outside the courtyard. A person flew in like a ray of light. When he was seen again, he was already sitting in his seat. This person was dressed in a snow-white robe, and his lapels were completely open, revealing a strong and snow-white chest. That kind of whiteness seemed to be whiter than snow. His face was also very white, even whiter than his chest. As for his appearance, it was likely that anyone who saw him would have their eyes lit up, praising him as a beautiful young man. Zhong Bai was the sect master of the East Continent's Divine Saber sect. Although he was young, his saber was definitely not young. His cultivation was definitely not young either. To be able to stand on equal footing with Bai Ziliang and Beigong Buwang, he had to at least have the strength of a saint. Beigong Buwang and Bai Ziliang were both saints. Beigong Buwang was a 4th-stage saint while Bai Ziliang was a 3rd-stage saint. "Greetings, young Master Zhong." Beigong Buwang cupped his fists and bowed again. Zhong Bai didn't dare to be arrogant and immediately returned the greeting. "Greetings, Senior Beigong." This was very simple. Although Zhong Bai was a saint, he was only a 2nd-order saint. If he wanted to form a relationship with the Central Continent, he would need to rely on Beigong Buwang. He clearly knew that if the Beigong clan succeeded in this deal, they would definitely rely on a large clan. Zhong Bai, you seem to be missing a dog head. Bai Ziliang was still disdainful of Zhong Bai. In his opinion, Zhong Bai must have made the decision at the last minute and rushed over without even preparing a dog head. I am missing a dog head, but I have a live dog and a human head. Which one do you want to see first? Zhong Bai sneered. As he spoke, he waved his hand, and a ferocious human head appeared in midair. The face was filled with anger, and there was also fear in that anger. The sect master of the Heavenly Dipper sect, Yang Rui. Chapter 2196. What do you think? Zhong Bai stared at Bai Ziliang's burning eyes and said, Yang Rui, he said that he hasn't been feeling well recently, so it's not convenient for him to come out and slaughter dogs. So, I made him feel completely comfortable. What do you think? Wouldn't a dead person feel completely comfortable? Bai Ziliang's pupils constricted, and he was slightly surprised. Then, he snorted coldly and said, Is that so? You're really capable, but I also prepared a head. With a swoosh, he waved his hand, and an old man's head flew out. The old man's face was filled with shock, as if he didn't know how he died. As soon as the head appeared, Zhong Bai was shocked. It's actually this old fart. You're really capable. He had to admit that Bai Ziliang was very capable. This was the ancestor of a big family in the East Continent, and he was a fifth-order saint. This old fart didn't come tonight, but Bai Ziliang brought his head. Zhong Bai wasn't the only one who could kill. Bai Ziliang could too. City Lord Bai, you're amazing. No matter what, I have to toast you. Zhong Bai was younger, and he was confident that his potential far surpassed Bai Ziliang's. So, he quickly calmed down. Moreover, he liked powerful dogs like Bai Ziliang. Bai Ziliang laughed and said, The faster the wine, the better. How about it? Sure. Zhong Bai stood up and raised his wine cup to Beigong Buwang. I'll toast Senior Beigong 3 times first. Ha ha. Beigong Buwang also laughed. Although I don't drink, I have to drink this cup no matter what. Then, he turned to Bai Ziliang and said, City Lord Bai, please raise your cup to celebrate our dog butcher's victorious return. Hihi, Senior Beigong, aren't you a little too anxious? Another burst of strange laughter came from outside the courtyard, and the 3 people behind him seemed to see a saber, a blood-red saber. With a swoosh, the 3 people didn't need to guess. The person had already appeared in front of them, and he had raised his wine cup. This person was dressed in black, and his face was very dark, like charcoal. Compared to Zhong Bai's face was excessively pale, and his face was excessively dark. Senior Bai and brother Zhong brought some dishes, and I also brought some, but Senior Beigong, please don't think it's too much. As the young man spoke, he flicked his hand and 3 heads flew out, hovering in midair. Tu Shuezhen. Fang Angua. Yi Feiyu. Beigong Buwang's group was shaken. These 3 wanted to kill the dogs with them, but they didn't come. However, their heads had to come. With the 2 people that Bai Ziliang and Zhong Bai had killed, as well as the 3 heads, the 9 families had finally gathered. The dog slaughtering alliance had successfully gathered, but it was a pity that there were 5 heads in the dog slaughtering alliance. Immediately, Zhong Bai's eyes narrowed dangerously. Just like how he liked the color white and hated the color black, he seemed to hate the young man in front of him. This young man seemed to be more capable than him, so Beigong Buwang would definitely attach more importance to him. The Central Prefecture would definitely think more highly of this black man than Zhong Bai. Bloodblade sect's Nai Tianhua truly lives up to his reputation. Beigong Buwang laughed happily. To be able to kill 3 saints in such a short period of time, this Nai Tianhua's strength was not ordinary. The most shocking thing was that Nai Tianhua was merely a first-order true saint. I wouldn't dare. Nai Tianhua didn't dare to be presumptuous in front of Beigong Buwang, and he said modestly, Dog slaughtering alliance is such a big matter, so I have to be careful. I spent some time and came late, please forgive me, Senior Beigong. Nephew Nai must be joking. Chapter 2197. At the beginning, the 4 of them had their own thoughts, and they were all talking about their own things. Only later did they start to talk about serious matters, and this was naturally organized by Beigong Buwang. City Lord Bai, young Master Zhong, and Nephew Nai. Beigong Buwang frowned and said, according to the information we received, the wild dog is proficient in the art of disguise, but he has no intention of hiding his appearance and identity. Furthermore, he walks very slowly, so we can be more or less sure that he is giving us a chance. It's just a matter of whether we dare or not. Whether it was Bai Ziliang, Zhong Bai, or Nai Tianhua, the three of them already knew this. That dog was indeed giving them a chance, or more accurately, baiting them into taking the bait. It was too obvious, and it was a kind of mockery, a kind of provocation. However, even though they looked down on that dog, they couldn't get angry. Being able to control a monarch weapon before reaching the saint tier, and killing saints like killing chickens, was a kind of ability, a kind of great ability. Bai Ziliang admitted that he didn't have such ability. Of course, Zhong Bai and Nai Tianhua also admitted that they didn't have such ability. Although they were very proud, in front of that dog, their pride was not only childish, but also powerless. I hate that dog's arrogance, Nai Tianhua said darkly. I don't believe that dog's head is that hard either. You're wrong, let me correct you. Zhong Bai sneered and said, that dog's head isn't hard, but his neck is. In the end, we have to cut off his head, not split open his dog head. I want to split open his dog head, can't I? Nai Tianhua's expression darkened, and absolutely no one could see it, but his cold eyes said a lot. Zhong Bai sneered and said, if you split open his dog head and sew it back together, it won't be troublesome, and it will probably make people feel disgusted. Are you sure you want to do that? I really want to split open your head. Nai Tianhua turned to stare coldly at Zhong Bai. His head was the proof of his achievements, and he needed a beautiful result, so his dog head couldn't be split open. Zhong Bai snorted coldly, and said without backing down, you can give it a try, let's see if your blade is sharper or my blade is sharper. If you have the ability, why don't you go and show off in front of that dog? Bai Ziliang suddenly said in an eccentric tone, I heard that the dog also uses a knife. If the two of you have the ability, why don't you go? Nai Tianhua and Zhong Bai immediately stopped talking. That dog was really amazing. If they were alone, none of them would be a match for that dog. They would only be courting death. Although that dog hadn't reached the saint level yet, it was still only in the transcendence realm. Such a dog really made them feel a little suffocated. All of their pride was not worth mentioning, and this was also the reason why this dog had to die. I can be sure of that. When Beigong Buwang saw that Zhong Bai and Nai Tianhua had stopped fighting, he opened his mouth again and said, Wild dog indeed didn't bring the emperor weapon with him, and he didn't have any helpers by his side. After a pause, he said coldly, although I don't know how to describe this wild dog, he is indeed too arrogant. He's not a saint, so how can he be so arrogant? Many people in the 6 great academies had the same idea as Brother Beigong, but they are all dead now, and they died in an extremely humiliating way. Bai Ziliang said in a low voice, there is also a saying in the 6 great academies, the Chu clan's illusion. How could the other 3 not know about the Chu clan's illusion? It was too famous. More importantly, could it be the Chu clan's illusion this time? None of the 4 could answer such a question. They fell into a short period of dead silence, and no one made a sound. Chu Yang gave them too much pressure and deterrence. His various miraculous and heaven-defying past made Beigong Buwang and the other 3 feel uneasy. Chu Yang was a mystery. To be honest, this was really too terrible. They couldn't confirm the strength of that dog. Once he attacked, they would die miserably like some people in the 6 great academies. It was even more tragic. Chapter 2198. But, after a long silence and a long consideration, Beigong Buwang paused heavily, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. We only have one chance, just one chance. Once that dog enters Zhongzhou, everything will have nothing to do with us. After the wild dogs entered the central state, these people were completely useless, and they were no longer needed. No one knew how many people in Zhongzhou state would rush to do something like dog butchering. They only had a chance because this dog was in the East continent. I will definitely kill this dog. Bai Ziliang gritted his teeth as the flames in his eyes took shape and jumped around. They were the flames of ambition and greed. His ambition was unstoppable, and if he wanted more, he could only go to Zhongzhou. However, if he wanted to go to Zhongzhou, He had to have an opportunity. The wild dog was the best opportunity, and he couldn't miss it. You can give up. Nai Tianhua's dark face suddenly looked at Zhongbai's fair face with a sneer. Zhongbai's fair face was like a mirror, almost reflecting Nai Tianhua's appearance. Although such an opportunity was full of uncertainty, Nai Tianhua couldn't give it up. Therefore, he mocked Zhongbai sharply. With your pretty face, you can live well in Dongju. You're still very proud of your ugly face. Who are you mocking for being a coward? Zhongbai was furious. He took out a head and said, "Look at what this is. Do you recognize it?" It was an old head. In addition to anger, there was also disdain, and even ridicule. Although the old man was dead, he seemed to have seen the person who killed him. He would definitely die a more miserable death. If Chu Yang was here, he would definitely recognize this head. It was the head of 6th granduncle in the deserted village. I was wondering why that old guy disappeared. Nai Tianhua looked at Zhongbai again and said in a sarcastic tone, "Are you that afraid of that dog? You took the head of an old dog and even hid its body. You're really something." Zhongbai couldn't take it anymore and was about to attack, but Beigong Buwang was stopped. Nai Tianhua's expression became even more disdainful. Then, he tossed a middle-aged man's head into the air and said with extreme disdain, "Do you recognize this head? Also, I can guarantee that not only will you find this dog's headless body in the village, you will also find many more." The entire village was slaughtered. Beigong Buwang, Bai Ziliang, and Zhongbai were all shocked. Because in this way, if they failed, then they wouldn't be the only ones to die. Their families and the powers they belonged to would definitely be implicated and die without a complete corp. The consequences were very serious. Nai Tianhua had not been particular about what he had done. Haha. But Beigong Buwang suddenly laughed out loud. "Nephew Nai, well done." "That's right." Bai Ziliang also smiled. "We're burning our boats. If Wild Dog doesn't die, then we will. We have no way out." I like the feeling of having no way out. Zhongbai was the only one who didn't say anything. He agreed with Nai Tianhua's point of view, but he definitely wouldn't agree. Because if Nai Tianhua was happy, he would be very unhappy. And in this aspect, he had lost again. Chapter 2199. There were no stars or moon, and the night sky was as dark as ink. The night was very deep and dark. Looking down at the entire gazing dragon city from the sky, there were thousands of lights and sparks. It was quiet and beautiful. It even made people feel that those sparks were the bright stars in the starry sky, and below seemed to be the endless night sky. High up in the sky, the wind was very strong, blowing Qian Zi's long hair and sleeves. Qian Zi's eyes were like two stars in the dark night, bright and bright. His gaze quietly fell on the end of the stone street for a long time. The house at the end of the street was very brightly lit. There was a cover formed by a formation outside. Once someone touched it, the people inside would immediately notice. Qian Zi did not want them to know of his existence, so he could only wait for Viper to return. The cover formed by the formation had a great warning function, but to some people, it was useless, just like Viper. Viper was used to hiding in the dark, so it was easy for him to sneak in. He would definitely not touch the formation and let the other party discover him. He waited with great anticipation for Viper's return. During the long wait, Qian Zi slowly became anxious. He hoped that the Beigong family would not disappoint him, but the result was the opposite. Viper returned silently. Qian Zi immediately sensed it and asked, "How was it?" Viper's face was gloomy. He shook his head and said, "Very bad. Although the so-called dog-slaughtering alliance is all here, 5 of the 9 people are only 5 heads. 5 out of 9 people were dead. In other words, there were only 4 saints." Qian Zi's gaze suddenly became dangerous. 4 saints were too few to deal with Chu Yang. The remaining members of the dog-slaughtering alliance are the Beigong family, the Bai family of the City of Raging Fire, the Godly Knife sect, and the Blood Knife sect. Viper explained the situation one by one. Bai Ziliang and Zhongbai each killed 1 saint, while Nai Tianhua killed 3 saint. Bai Ziliang and Zhongbai deserved to die. Qian Zi immediately gritted his teeth. Nai Tianhua deserves to die even more. These idiots and pigs all deserve to die. Qianzi lost his composure, but Viper didn't say anything. This was because his opponent was Chu Yang's dog. No matter who it was, they would feel a lot of pressure when facing that dog, even if that person was Qianzi. The more Viper understood how terrifying Chu Yang was, the more he understood how much pressure Qianzi was currently under. 4 sages shouldn't be enough to test that dog. Venomous Snake's head was starting to hurt. He muttered to himself, "Then what should I do?" Qianzi didn't say anything, but his eyes kept flickering. Behind him, the black night sky was like a hot pot, and he was like an ant, anxiously scurrying around in the sky. Since the Beigong clan and the others are no longer of any use in probing, why don't we join forces with them and combine all our forces to kill that dog? Viper thought of an idea and said fiercely, "If we don't succeed, we'll die trying." No. Qianzi suddenly paused. After thinking rapidly, he immediately rejected the idea. Beigong Buwang, Bai Ziliang, Zhongbai, and that Nai Tianhua are just 4 pieces of trash. With or without them, our battle strength won't be affected much. If we count on them, we might as well kill ourselves with a piece of tofu. Chu Yang hadn't reached the saint realm. Once he was attacked by a saint, he would definitely have to use his trump cards. Therefore, in Qianzi's opinion, Beigong Buwang and the others could test some of Chu Yang's trump cards, but they definitely couldn't test all of Chu Yang's trump cards and his true trump cards. Chapter 2200. When will Niu Dao come? There was no need to use Niu Dao to kill a chicken. Niu Dao was a codename. This codename meant that there was an expert in the god's world who was comparable to an earthly sovereign realm expert. Qianzi had already asked for help from the god's world. Niu Dao won't come. Viper paused for a moment and then said coldly, "But there is Ren Shou." Ren Shou? Qianzi was overjoyed when he heard this. His eyes lit up. Ren Shou was the meat on the chopping block. This Ren Shou was such a Ren Shou. Ren Shou was a supreme expert from the god's world who hid in the heavenly spirit world. He wouldn't make a move easily. Therefore, Qianzi wasn't qualified to know who Ren Shou was. He didn't expect that the legendary Ren Shou would respond. What did Ren Shou say? Qianzi asked impatiently. "Do what you can and don't do what you can't." Venomous Snake frowned and said, "What he means is that he still wants that dog to turn the Central Plains upside down. If we can't kill him, it means that he has the ability to do so. Therefore, we are just testing whether he has the ability to do so." Ren Shou's intention was different from Qianzi's. Qianzi wanted to kill Chu Yang so that Chu Yang wouldn't become a threat to the god's world in the future. He furrowed his brows in displeasure. Does the butcher already know how terrifying this dog is? He knows. Viper understood Qianzi's meaning. Ren Shou agrees with you. He can't make up his mind. Therefore, Ren Shou sent 10 saints from the central state. 10 saints. Qianzi was shocked. The haze on his face was swept away. All the pressure in his heart was released. He clenched his fist and said excitedly, "Including the 10 saints from the Dark Thorn, there are 20 saints in total. We will split into 2 groups. One group will be in charge of probing and the other group will be in charge of killing that dog." This is enough. Many things were happening in the dark night. Chu Yang could guess that the enemy had made a move, but he didn't know the exact situation. If he knew that Qianzi was so cautious and used 20 saints to split into 2 groups, one group to probe and the other group to kill him, he would have fled back to the East Continent immediately. Unfortunately, he didn't know the slightest bit. He was still slowly fishing, luring the fish to take the bait. On the morning of the second day, when the sun peeked out from behind the mountains, the warmth of the first few rays of light immediately intertwined with the final chill of the night. The air was very early in the morning, and the sky was slowly rising. Chu Yang bathed in the faint light of the morning. He looked around and slowly entered Looking Dragon City. He ate breakfast in Looking Dragon City and took a nap before lazily leaving Looking Dragon City. Ever since he had left the Eastern Violet Chi courtyard until now, he had clearly sensed that there were quite a few people watching him from the shadows. These people had been following him all the way, but he had no intention of making a move. They were just some shrimps, he had no interest in them at all. On the way, He was also thinking about Zhongzhou. He knew from Shangguanlan that there was an imperial examination in Zhongzhou. It was divided into two parts, the written examination and the martial examination. The two were roughly equal. Sometimes, the academic test was even more important than the combat test. It was very strange. After all, the heavenly soul world was a world that advocated martial strength. From his point of view, the written examination was just something those people in Zhongzhou created to consolidate their rule and highlight their nobility. It was reasonable for it to exist. Chu Yang didn't pursue this. He only hoped that he remembered those poems and articles in his previous life. They weren't too disconnected from Zhongzhou. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would be blind in this aspect. He felt that the probability of him being blind was higher. Although he had a love rival surnamed Kong in Zhongzhou, it didn't mean that there was a sage Kong in Zhongzhou. Second is missing. I should have asked Lanlan clearly back then. I don't have to think blindly now. Chapter 2201. Before he knew it, he had come to the place where he had killed the sage of the central prefecture. The abyss created by the fight between Bing Kuan and the sage of the central prefecture was right in front of him. The abyss was huge and deep. Even with Chu Yang's divine perception, he could not find the bottom of it. He could not help but ask in his consciousness, Kuan, can you be gentler to Mother Earth? Look at how big the scars are. I can't even look at them. My heart hurts so much. Master, it's none of my business. It was done by those guys in the central prefecture. I just went down to catch them and then killed them. Bing Kuan did not admit that he had made a great contribution. Kuan, it's not good to lie. Suddenly, Chu Yang jumped to another problem and said angrily, these damn fish, haven't they taken the bait yet? If they don't take the bait, then goodbye, then it's Xiangyura. After this abyss, Chu Yang thought that the territory of the central prefecture should be in front of him. At that time, he would definitely disappear. Who could find him? Hey, master, it seems that you are not only not suitable to be a bait, but also not good at fishing. Just as Bing Kuan was joking, two saber lights that were thousands of feet long chopped down from the sky. One of them was very scarlet, and a strong smell of blood pervaded the air. The other one was very white, and the saber light was so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. In addition, the ground under his feet suddenly turned red and turned into magma in an instant. A magma column rose to the sky and turned into a magma dragon, rushing straight to Chu Yang. At the same time, a blue figure suddenly emerged from the void and appeared silently behind Chu Yang. It pressed down on Chu Yang's head with its palm. This palm was very restrained, and no aura escaped, as if it did not exist. But if one did not notice it, it would be too late when it completely fell. The two blade auras immediately attracted Chu Yang's attention. When the third and fourth attacks suddenly burst forth, he was even more caught off guard and did not know how to react. The most terrible thing was that these were all attacks that the saints had planned for a long time. Every attack could be said to be extremely precise, catching Chu Yang off guard. Their cooperation was also very good. He was really not prepared for the last two attacks at all. With his current strength, he was almost certain to die. He didn't even have time to use the 5 Hells Mother-Child Heavenly Demon Cauldrons. Fortunately, there was the Ice Kuan. There was no need for Chu Yang to speak. As soon as the Ice Kuan moved, the void immediately changed. Immediately, the 2,000-foot-long saber lights became incomparably distant, and no one could sense any pressure from them. It was as if the two saber lights in the movies only existed in an illusion and were not real. The same went for the magma dragon that rushed up from the ground and the palm that fell silently. In an instant, Chu Yang seemed to have left the heavenly soul realm and appeared in another space and time. At this moment, Chu Yang realized how shallow his understanding of space techniques was. Rumble. The two saber lights slashed down, and the void was easily cut open like a piece of paper. A space storm swept out. The palm that pressed down fell silently, and the void there turned into a black hole in an instant. The magma dragon that rushed up to the sky rushed directly into the black hole. The space there exploded, like a giant ship being blown up. The space storm was like water, crazily pouring in. There seemed to be countless people appearing in it. They were frightened, trembling in the face of death, forming a scene of doomsday. For Chu Yang, it was a martial arts movie at the beginning, but in an instant, it turned into a disaster movie. The fish has finally taken the bait. He smiled complacently, and then his expression suddenly turned cold. His killing intent was dense. This would be his last killing in the East Continent, at least he thought so. Chapter 2202. The void exploded, and a spatial storm raged. The void suddenly sank like the earth, forming an abyss. A huge, black hole appeared, like the mouth of a giant beast. Chu Yang was in that darkness, but he was in a different dimension. He was enveloped by a sparkling spatial cover. A faint light shone, as if the pitch-black spatial storm was the night sky, and he was the only star in the night sky. In a place far away from Chu Yang, where he couldn't sense anything at all, Qianzi and Viper could clearly feel the energy fluctuations coming from the battlefield. However, they just stood in place and stared into the distance. Are we really not going over? Beigong Buwang and the other three had already attacked. If they didn't rush over, they wouldn't know what was going on. They definitely wouldn't know anything about the trump card Chu Yang revealed when he killed Beigong Buwang and the other three. Viper was a little anxious. We can't go over. Qianzi also had the desire to immediately rush over. His eyes were filled with eagerness and anxiety, but in the end, he restrained himself. Why? Viper was puzzled. That dog isn't at the Saint Realm. He used his trump card to kill Beigong Buwang and the other three. It should be over soon. If we hesitate, we really won't be able to see anything. Chu Yang wasn't a saint. If he relied on other means, he should be able to kill Beigong Buwang and the other three in an instant. Qianzi naturally agreed with this judgment. Chu Yang wasn't a saint, so he couldn't be careless. Therefore, his means must be very shocking. However, Viper thought that Chu Yang's battle with Beigong Buwang and the other four would definitely be very short. However, he didn't think of anything else. That dog's target is me, Qianzi said in a deep voice. I originally missed a problem. Therefore, Beigong Buwang and the other three aren't only a little useful. They are completely useless. That dog's target is me. Viper instantly understood. Chu Yang used himself as bait mainly to lure Qianzi out. If Qianzi didn't appear, how would he reveal his trump card? Therefore, Chu Yang would definitely search the surroundings first. He would first confirm that Qianzi wasn't hiding in a dark place, waiting to give him a fatal blow. As such, if Qianzi were to take the initiative to approach and see Chu Yang's trump card, it would be the same as sending himself to his doorstep. However, Qianzi had no way of knowing the process of this battle. Thus, Beigong Buwang, Bai Ziliang, and the others were naturally of no use. I can go over. That dog might not be able to find me. Viper was good at hiding, so Chu Yang might not be able to detect him. Furthermore, he wasn't Qianzi, so Chu Yang probably wouldn't care too much about him. Qianzi's gaze landed in the direction of Chu Yang. It was as if his gaze could penetrate through the layers of distant space and see everything that was happening. No, that dog is not an ordinary one. You should know that by now. Viper was still unwilling to give up and said, even if he finds out, he won't care much about me. You are already a saint. Do you think that dog can ignore you? Viper was immediately speechless. This was indeed impossible. Even if you aren't a saint, who knows what will happen if you fall into his hands? Therefore, we definitely can't gamble. We can't let that dog detect anything beforehand. Qianzi was incomparably calm. The restlessness in his heart had completely calmed down. Also, you better not forget that that dog has an identity called Liu San. Chapter 2203. The super arrester was best at digging out the secrets behind and finding the murderer with just a little bit of clues. He absolutely could not take this risk. Viper also completely suppressed his desire to gamble. After that, he no longer had the slightest desire to spy. He could only faintly look at where Chu Yang was. Ice Kuan, have you found Qianzi's trace? At this time, Chu Yang was already asking Ice Kuan. Just as Qianzi thought, Chu Yang wanted to see Qianzi the most. Of course, the person he wanted to lure out the most was naturally Qianzi. Master, no. Ice Kuan said, if he doesn't have any precious weapons on him that can hide himself, I will definitely be able to find him. Chu Yang's brows slightly wrinkled. He secretly said in his heart, is this only Qianzi's probing? Is he waiting for me to reveal myself before he starts making things difficult for me? It's really a bit difficult to deal with. The void quickly closed up. The black spatial storm was like a sore that had been opened. It was quickly hidden and completely disappeared. Peace was restored between heaven and earth, and Chu Yang also returned to this space. 4 people, 2 middle-aged men and 2 young men, surrounded Chu Yang from 4 directions. Immediately, Chu Yang's eyes fell on the person who made him feel the most dangerous. It was a middle-aged man in a blue shirt, with a fair face and an elegant demeanor. The middle-aged man in a blue shirt was proficient in space techniques. Just now, he had silently appeared in the sky behind him. If it were not for Ice Kuan, he would have been killed. At this moment, the middle-aged man in a blue shirt was staring at Chu Yang with great vigilance. His eyes were full of solemnity, and his whole body was completely tense. However, there was not a single trace of nervousness on the handsome face opposite him. There was not the slightest hint of surprise, let alone fear. He even sensed that Chu Yang was calm and indifferent. Chu Yang's main focus was on investigating the surroundings, and not on them. What kind of reliance does he have to be like this? Beigong Buwang's heart almost completely sank. What he felt was also what Bai Ziliang, Zhong Bai, and Nai Tianhua felt. The 3 of them also narrowed their eyes. They had no choice but to do so. The 4 of them had carefully prepared this attack and calculated many things, but it was easily resolved by Chu Yang. This was the first time they felt how amazing Chu Yang was. However, at such a low realm, his understanding of space techniques was so deep that it was far beyond that of a sage. At least, the 4 sages felt that they were inferior to him. Chu Yang's eyes moved away from the blue-robed middle-aged man. He immediately saw Bai Ziliang, whose red hair draped over his shoulders. He had a golden earring on his left ear. Zhong Bai's chest was white, and his face was even whiter. Finally, there was Nai Tianhua, whose face was dark. Bai Ziliang had his eyebrows like 2 flames. Zhong Bai was Shue was also Shue had also Shue Nai Tianhua was also a saber. It was a blood-colored saber, and there seemed to be blood flowing from it. Before the saber moved, an endless smell of blood filled the air. Chu Yang seemed to smell the blood of many creatures. One is proficient in space techniques, one has an amazing understanding of fire techniques, and 2 saber cultivators. Chu Yang secretly sized up these 4 people and kept evaluating in his heart. Are these 4 people enough to kill me? If the enemy in the dark only has this little strength, would they dare to attack me? He was confident that everything he had done in the East Continent, coupled with the appearance of the Emperor artifact demonic clock, had formed a great deterrent force. There were only 4 enemies, so they would definitely not dare to find trouble with him. However, it seemed that things had really happened. Chapter 2204. Wild Dog, Who Are You Looking Down On? Chu Yang's contempt completely enraged Nai Tianhua. The scarlet saber in his hand immediately hacked towards Chu Yang. In an instant, the whole world was covered in the color of blood. It was as if the world had been cut open by the saber. Blood spurted out from the wound, which was extremely shocking. Nai Tianhua moved, and the other killers also moved. Beigong Buwang instantly disappeared into the void, but he didn't immediately appear. He was like a venomous snake lurking in the dark, an assassin, patiently waiting for a fatal blow. Zhong Bai's saber slashed out. Not only was it whiter than his exposed chest, but it was also whiter than his face. The white saber light poured down from the 9th heaven like a Milky Way. Saber chi swept in all directions, drowning and destroying everything. Bai Ziliang was the last to move. His red hair curled up, and he was like a ball of divine flame. At first, he was like a meteorite from outer space, but in the end, he seemed to have turned into a great sun. Endless flames swept out, burning the void until it seemed to be dehydrated. Among the 4 fish, There isn't a single 5th-level saint. You want to kill me? Chu Yang resisted the urge to make a move. So, he could only dodge. If Qianzi can hide, can't I find him? Immediately, he came up with a strategy. Qianzi was probably hiding in a very secret place or hiding far away. But under the cover of dodging, he radiated in all directions and then searched. Even if he couldn't find Qianzi, he could confirm the current situation. Everyone, see you later, Shoyang Nyara. Chu Yang's figure also disappeared into the void, completely disappearing. And in the place where he was, the void was once again split apart and blasted apart. The ferocity and terror of the spatial storm was once again revealed to the world. East Continent, Sky Academy's direction. Beigong Buwang's voice came out from the void, reminding Bai Ziliang, Zhongbai, and Nai Tianhua. Swoosh, swoosh. The three of them moved together and sealed off that space, blocking Chu Yang's path. At the same time, Beigong Buwang also appeared. He pressed down with his big white hand and Chu Yang appeared again. However, Chu Yang was in the spatial layer, and his vision was distorted. He felt that it was very far away, as if he couldn't touch it at all. I'm sorry. Chu Yang giggled again and said, Who said I'm going back to the Purple Chi East Courtyard? Do you know what it means to create a diversion? This marshal wants to go to the Central State. Many thanks to the four of you for making way for me. Shua. His figure flickered and disappeared again. During this process, he had already investigated clearly. He hadn't detected Qianzi in the direction of Purple Chi from the east. Next, he would head in the direction of the central region. Relying on the Ice Kuan's spatial technique, Chu Yang's range of movement was very large. It was to the extent that Qianzi and Poison Snake could sense his movements. They were so shocked that they hurriedly dodged. At this time, Poison Snake's body was covered in cold sweat. Qianzi's guess was not wrong at all. If they hadn't been careful just now, they would have been completely exposed and completely finished. What a wild dog. If we're not careful, we'll be doomed eternally. In an instant, Poison Snake was extremely afraid of Chu Yang and felt even more pressure. Such an enemy was too difficult to deal with. They couldn't find the slightest opportunity and couldn't be careless. Shua, 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 shua. Chu Yang just wanted to escape, but Beigong Buwang and the other three couldn't do much. Like 4 hunting dogs, they chased after Chu Yang crazily. Their figures filled the air. Their speed was too fast. Their afterimages seemed to dye the void black. A faint black color could be seen, like a thin layer of fog. During this period of time, Chu Yang looked in all directions twice. However, he still couldn't find Qianzi, nor could he find anyone else. Chapter 2205. Is it really just these 4 fishes? Where did these 4 fishies get the guts to try and kill me with just 4 saints? Chu Yang fell into a state of confusion. He was hesitant and didn't make any moves. Beigong Buwang and the other 4 dignified saints, were actually in such a sorry state, like a dog chasing its prey. Their anger attacked their hearts sinking bit by bit into an icy cavern, freezing over bit by bit. The wild dog had not even made a move, and they were already helpless against it. How shocking was this? What level had wild dog's spatial techniques reached? The 4 of them didn't know, which was why they were terrified. Shio. In the process of another chase, Zhongbai suddenly threw out a human head, blocking Chu Yang's path. Wild dog, look at whose head this is. Doesn't it look familiar? Chu Yang reached out and caught the head. The moment he caught it, he shivered as if he was frozen. He suddenly shivered and said in shock, 6th great uncle, Baron Village, 6th great uncle's head. How could Chu Yang forget this? Wang. Chu Yang was enraged. The void vibrated, and ripples of void rippled outwards. His gaze was as terrifying as a demon's. He stared coldly at Zhongbai and his extremely white face. Oh, this old wild dog is your 6th great uncle. Zhongbai gritted his teeth and said resentfully, Wild dog, are you satisfied? I've chopped off your 6th great uncle's head for you. Also, let me tell you, this old wild dog died a painful death. Although I could have chopped off his head directly, I cut it off bit by bit. Listening to his screams made me very happy. Crack crack. Chu Yang gritted his teeth so hard that they made cracking sounds. He was so angry that he trembled. With a swoosh, another head was thrown over. Wild dog, look at this head again. Do you recognize it? Hearing the voice, Chu Yang's fierce gaze swept over. A face that was like the bottom of a pot was imprinted in his eyes. Wild dog, didn't you want to know who I am? Nai Tianhua sneered. My name is Nai Tianhua, from the Bloodblade sect. When he saw Chu Yang's ferocious expression, he laughed happily. Are you angry? Then I'll tell you something even more pleasant. I've slaughtered most of the barren village. How does it feel? Haha. After saying that, he laughed out loud. The other three also looked at Chu Yang with cold smiles. The ear-piercing laughter drilled into Chu Yang's ears. He was in a daze, as if his soul had left his body, as if he had temporarily left this world. Images of his sixth great-uncle and uncle who kept appearing in his mind. He was not very close to Uncle Hu and his sixth great-uncle, but Uncle Hu was the first person he met in the East Continent. At that time, he and the parrot had just entered the East Continent. They were cautious and slightly nervous, looking at the people and things in this new world. Uncle Hu had warmly received them. His sixth great-uncle did not have that, but he was a kind old man. He was worried about the eastern wilderness, but he also cared for him. In the end, he even pushed him to be the leader of the eastern wilderness. The people of the barren village were also kind. They were looking forward to a new beginning. But when they finally got a new beginning, they were all slaughtered. Anger, resentment, guilt, self-blame, all kinds of emotions surged into Chu Yang's heart in an instant. Chu Yang's body trembled like a sieve. Blue veins appeared on his hands and neck. He bit down on the corner of his mouth, and a faint smell of blood pervaded the air. His world quickly turned blood red. He seemed to hear the screams of his sixth great-uncle, Uncle Hu, and the people of the barren village. He also seemed to hear their resentment towards him. Why did he go so easy on the animals of the East Continent? You're the one who got us into this. Chapter 2206. You bastards, you all deserve to die. Every word was said through gritted teeth. It was as cold as ice, as sharp as a knife, and as venomous as a curse. Looking at Chu Yang's ferocious face, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets, and his berserk aura like that of a wild beast, Zhong Bai suddenly felt cold. He pulled his clothes and wrapped them around his bare chest. Nai Tianhua's pupils also shrank abruptly. If a dragon had a reverse scale that couldn't be touched, then he had touched Chu Yang's reverse scale. At this moment, Beigong Buwang and Bai Ziliang couldn't help but feel a chill. They couldn't help but feel a trace of uneasiness and panic in their hearts. In order to force Chu Yang to fight with them, they had completely enraged such a terrifying figure. Once they were defeated, they would definitely die tragically. This was definitely not the end. Their families, their friends, they would probably all die miserably as well. Kill. Beigong Buwang was also completely furious. He roared, either you die or I die. If we can't kill this wild dog today, the four of us will definitely die. Our families and friends will also be implicated. Now that things had come to this, they could only cut off all means of retreat. This kind of cutting off all means of retreat was very different from what they had expected. It was much more intense than they had imagined. If we don't kill him, our families will be exterminated. In Bai Ziliang's mind, everything about the Bai family appeared. As the head of the Bai family, he had attacked the wild dog. How could the wild dog let the Bai family go? Kill. Zhong Bai and Nai Tianhua also vowed to fight to the death. If they were defeated, the two of them would definitely die the most miserable deaths. The wild dog would probably not be able to vent his hatred even if he turned them into ashes. Beigong Buwang used the space technique and completely disappeared into the void. This was the space technique of the Sky Academy. After the leader of the Heaven Palace sect became the leader of the Sky Academy, he secretly passed this secret technique to the Beigong family. Therefore, Beigong Buwang had obtained the complete space technique of the Sky Academy. He didn't believe that the wild dog could surpass him by much. Holy flame! Peng! The white pieces glowed brightly, and streaks of holy marks as thick as iron chains appeared. They were ignited like dry firewood, burning fiercely. White holy flames burst out and burned a black hole in the void with a sizzling sound. Naturally, Zhongbai and Nai Tianhua were also going all out. Since they were not on good terms with each other, they combined their 3,000-foot-long saber-lights into one and formed a 3,000-foot-long saber-light. The white saber-light and the crimson saber-light merged together like a blood-stained bandage. They wrapped around Chu Yang, who was wounded, and the void was silently cut open. "You guys are fierce. You guys are evil. You guys are poisonous." Chu Yang stood motionless in midair and roared, "Are you as fierce as me, as evil as me, as venomous as me? None of you will be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation. I will definitely make your divine souls go through endless torment, as if you have fallen into an endless hell. You will suffer a fate worse than death." Rumble. As he roared, his body suddenly became chaotic. 6 cauldrons rushed out from his body, 5 small cauldrons and 1 large cauldron to protect his surroundings. The 5 Hell's Mother and Heavenly Demon cauldrons were Chu Yang's first means. He had intended to use them to deal with Chen Zi and the others. He had never thought that he would use them on Beigong Buwang and the other 3. In the blink of an eye, the 6 people's attacks all fell. The Mother Cauldron blocked the 3,000-foot-long saber light. The Water Cauldron of the 5 elements, the metal, wood, water, fire, and earth cauldrons, went to meet Bai Ziliang. The Golden Cauldron directly smashed toward Beigong Buwang, who had suddenly appeared out of the void. Clang. Chapter 2207. Rumble. Many large arrays appeared in the water cauldron, and monstrous water gushed out, forming a huge wave that rushed toward Bai Ziliang. Kai, kai, kai. When the fire met the water, it burned and turned into a white fog that enveloped the world. The sacred fire on Bai Ziliang's body was directly extinguished by the water. What? Bai Ziliang couldn't believe it. His eyes widened, and when he looked at the water cauldron, he lost his composure and exclaimed, "A top-grade sacred artifact, how is this possible?" He was almost scared out of his wits when a top-grade sacred artifact suddenly appeared. He had heard of the 5 Hells Mother-Child Heavenly Demon Cauldron, but when did it become a top-grade sacred artifact? The water cauldron was just a child cauldron. The 5 Hells Mother-Child Heavenly Demon Cauldron was originally a top-grade sacred artifact. Although it had been destroyed, it had been reconstructed and restored. Then, with the Ice Kuan's saint origin to refine it, how was it impossible for it to be restored to a top-grade sacred artifact? In the 5 Hells Mother-Child Heavenly Demon Cauldron, the Ice Kuan had injected the origins of 7 saints. The origins of these 7 saints had not reached the top grade, but with the Ice Kuan, the Arch Artifact, and the 5 Hells Mother-Child Heavenly Demon Cauldron, it was easy for it to become a top-grade sacred artifact. Otherwise, how could Chu Yang be so presumptuous as to use himself as bait to lure the enemy? If his first method was not shocking enough, how could he form the illusion of the Chu clan and deceive everyone? Fut. In the chaos, Beigong Buwang originally thought that he had seized a great opportunity, but his spatial technique seemed to be child's play in front of the wild dog. As soon as he appeared, the golden cauldron immediately smashed over, and he felt as if he had been hit by a mountain. His bones and tendons were broken on the spot. Qi Qiao spat out blood and flew out, turning into a bloody man. He was also frightened like Bai Ziliang, a top-grade sacred artifact. Let's go. The child cauldron of the 5 Hells Mother-Child Heavenly Demon Cauldron was already so terrifying. What about the Mother Cauldron? Beigong Buwang was terrified. After suffering a heavy blow, he immediately retreated decisively. Even if he didn't shout, Bai Ziliang, Zhongbai, and Nai Tianhua would definitely not have the courage to fight. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The 4 of them split up in 4 different directions and fled madly. Their courage was almost scared out of their wits. Run! Where are you running to? Chu Yang opened his arms and roared into the sky. His 5 avatars, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, as well as the avatar from the heavenly spirit world, rushed out. The 5 elements avatars and the child cauldrons of the corresponding attributes merged into one, while the heavenly soul world avatar held the mother cauldron to intercept. 6 clones? How is that possible? Beigong Buwang and the other 3, who were running away, sensed Chu Yang's 6 clones. They were so scared that they trembled and stopped. At this moment, they were almost scared to death. Previously, they had heard that Chu Yang, this wild dog, was amazing. Although they were afraid, it was inevitable that they had doubts. Was this wild dog really as amazing as people said? They no longer had any doubts. This wild dog was even more godly and terrifying than what people had said. It was simply unimaginable. Could clones be created so easily? Just the fact that his divine soul was split into 6 meant that his divine soul would be weakened to the extreme. However, the wild dog's divine soul showed no signs of weakening. The strength of his divine soul was close to that of a saint. It completely defied common sense, and it was precisely because of this that it was terrifying. Rumble. The world was in chaos. Chu Yang's metal avatar held the golden cauldron and smashed it at Beigong Buwang. Beigong Buwang used spatial techniques, but it was useless. He was instantly found and smashed out. In just 3 hits, he was smashed into 2 on the 3rd hit. His screams resounded through the sky. The golden cauldron swallowed and directly swallowed his saint's source energy. Chu Yang's metal avatar opened its hand and directly grabbed his divine soul. Clang! Clang! Chapter 2208. Wild Dog, You Are Truly Too Vicious. Bai Ziliang saw Beigong Buwang's fate, shivering in fright. Not only was he refined into a fake soul weapon to block the calamity for the real soul weapon, he was also refined day and night, living a life worse than death. However, he couldn't resist at all. Under the pincer attack of the fire cauldron and water cauldron, he was directly flattened like a pancake, his saint source and divine soul also completely extracted. He truly couldn't reincarnate even if he wanted to. The mother cauldron released a great formation, together with the wood cauldron and earth cauldron, as well as Chu Yang's 3 clones, trapping Zhong Bai and Nai Tianhua in the Great Formation. The reason why these 2 didn't die wasn't because they were more capable than Beigong Buwang, but rather because the wild dog was thinking of how to deal with them. Absorbing divine souls to refine fake soul weapons, but they couldn't even become soul weapons. This was already very tragic, but this still wasn't enough. Zhong Bai's white face became even paler, so pale that it was devoid of color. Nai Tianhua's black face also became pale, deathly pale, like the face of a dead person. With a shua sound, Chu Yang's main body arrived, standing in the air, looking at them coldly, without a trace of emotion, as if he was looking at fish on a chopping board. Zhong Bai couldn't help but shiver. In his mind, that old wild dog's cold sneer and ridicule before death appeared. You will definitely die miserably. You'll die as miserably as I die. And the thing you shouldn't do in this life is to kill me. At first, he didn't care. Wasn't it just a wild dog called Chu Yang? What was there to be proud of? But now, he believed it. Everything was becoming reality bit by bit. However, Chu Yang still didn't make a move, letting the 2 struggle in fear, experiencing that kind of helplessness, that kind of torment, even more so making the 2 feel endless pain. Chu Yang looked at the 2. He also thought about Uncle Hu, 6th great uncle, and the people of the desolate village. What kind of fear did they die in? Every time he thought about it, the guilt in his heart would increase a little, and the anger in his heart would also increase a level. At this moment, Nai Tianhua was also afraid. He was also terrified. When he was slaughtering the villagers, he was delighted to see the terrified and helpless faces of the villagers turn into himself. Every single one of them was terrified and helpless. The evils he brought upon himself were the hardest to bear. He didn't treat others as humans, but as ants and beasts. How he treated others was how he would be treated today. He understood the logic, but it was already too late. Wild dog, you can hate and be angry, but those dogs that I killed will never come back to life. You will live in guilt for the rest of your life, haha. Despair could make people go crazy, and Nai Tianhua was more or less the same. No matter how much pain he was in, he had to make Chu Yang suffer. You will be disappointed. I won't feel guilty forever, but only for a short period of time. Chu Yang's face was ferocious, but his words were extremely calm, causing Zhong Bai and Nai Tianhua to shudder. Uncle Hu, 6th great uncle, And the people of the desolate village, they are all kind people. They definitely don't want me to feel guilty and let you two beasts have your way. How can I let them down? You can go to hell. In an instant, Nai Tianhua and Zhong Bai were both fixed. They found that they couldn't break free. This was not caused by the five hells mother-child heavenly demon cauldron, it was caused by an even more terrifying force. The space was completely locked down. Crack. The two of them watched as their heads were twisted off. The moment they were released, they cried out in pain. Subsequently, both of their saint essences and divine souls were extracted. Their soul was refined into a fake soul weapon, and their sage's origin was stored. This was just the beginning. Chapter 2209. Chu Yang disappeared, and 4 more corpses appeared in this world. Some were headless, some were cut in half, and some were turned into a big flat cake. All the fluctuations had completely calmed down. The white clouds that floated back from the sky seemed to be the people who had been scared away and came back to see the result of such a great battle. The wind whistled. This seemed to be the people's shock and also their discussion. The sky was still high, the ground was still open, and the clouds were still floating in the sky. As the wind blew gently, it seemed to be caressing everything on the ground. This world regained its peace once again. The gentle wind was not very strong, but it still blew at the corners of Qianzi's clothes and his hair. After he and Viper rushed over, they sensed everything in this world. However, it seemed that they only sensed a piece of white paper. That dog had wiped away many of the traces too cleanly. Beigong Buwang, Bai Ziliang, Zhong Bai, and Nai Tianhua's corpses were there, but the two of them were not coroners or super-arresters of the central province, so they could not deduce how these 4 people died. Of course, they could take these 4 corpses to the central province, but the 2 of them did not dare to do so. Perhaps the wild dog deliberately left these corpses for them. If they touched these 4 corpses, they would definitely be noticed by the wild dog. Therefore, they did not dare to touch these 4 corpses. When they left later, they even had to erase their auras completely. They had to treat that dog like this, and they had to be so cautious, because that dog had once again proved its ability. Beigong Buwang and the other 3 people had died in vain, just as the 2 of them had thought. They had not played any role at all. They died so miserably. Viper could not help but speak. He was not afraid of death, but he was afraid of dying in vain. Wasn't dying in vain the most miserable way? At least for him, that was the case. It's indeed very miserable. They are not much different from chickens and dogs. In fact, Qianzi didn't want his intuition to be right. However, every time his intuition was right, it was telling him how amazing and terrifying that dog was. Who knows, that wild dog might have already become a great threat to our god realm. For the first time, Qianzi felt a little discouraged. It was also the first time he felt that the road ahead was bleak. This had never happened before. Venomous Snake did not know what to say. That wild dog almost suffocated him. He even suspected that the 10 sages would not be able to find out anything. If it wasn't for the fact that the 10 saints couldn't find out anything and died tragically like Beigong Buwang, what was the use of the remaining 10 saints? He was thinking about this problem, and so was Qianzi. In the end, the 2 said in unison, "It seems that we don't have the ability to test this wild dog." Such tacit understanding made the hearts of the 2 people sink. There is only one chance to kill that dog. We must gather all of our forces, and break through Chu Yang's trump card. Then, we must kill him. However, would 20 saints be enough? 20 saints was not a small number, and it was more than enough to kill the 2 of them. Killing one who had not reached the saint realm was even more of a fuss. That was why they had such thoughts. If others found out, they would probably be laughed at to death. There will definitely be a bloody wind in the East Continent. I only hope that Wild Dog goes a little overboard and intensifies the conflict so that the people of the East Continent will rise up and resist. Chapter 2210. We should pay attention to that dog, but we shouldn't belittle ourselves, right? Viper's words made sense. After a moment of shock, Qianzi's eyes lit up again. You're right. In this battle, I've been winning since the beginning. I've never lost. It could be said that every judgment he made about Chu Yang was extremely accurate. Of course, this was also a kind of victory. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll be victorious in every battle. Only by understanding your opponent well enough could you kill him. While Qianzi and Viper were investigating the battlefield, Chu Yang had already returned to the east and returned to the eastern Purple Qi courtyard. This news immediately alarmed the entire East continent. Chu Yang's murderous look made many people in the East continent panic. Chu Yang had left and returned. Just this question alone was worth pondering. Moreover, his overflowing murderous aura had illustrated the seriousness of the problem even more. Soon, many people found out that the barren village had been massacred. 2 of the most important people in the village had their heads chopped off as well. Their corpses were nowhere to be found. This shocked the Gongsun family, the Stardo Academy, the Myriad Demon Sect, and many other major forces in the East continent. Who was so bold? Chu Yang had just arrived in the East continent and was at the peak of his power, but someone dared to stroke the tiger's whiskers. Later on, when the people of the East continent found out that Chu Yang had been intercepted and killed halfway, the world was turned upside down. How could this be? If Chu Hang was completely enraged, wouldn't the East continent flow with rivers of blood? Sure enough, just as they thought, Chu Yang held the Emperor Artifact Demonic Bell and arrived in Looking Dragon City. He almost slaughtered the Beigong family in Looking Dragon City. That day, the entire Looking Dragon City fell into extreme panic. Everyone was nervous. Chu Yang said that he would kill, and he did so without any explanation or words. It was fine if it was just the Beigong family, but many people who were related to the Beigong family, and even those who weren't, were all slaughtered. They died one after another, causing the entire Looking Dragon City to instantly fall into a power vacuum. Looking Dragon City was just the beginning. While the people of the East continent were in a state of panic, the 6 colleges, the Gongsun family, and the 10,000 Demon Sect worked together to slaughter the Divine Knife Sect, the Blood Knife Sect, the Bai family of the City of Raging Flames, and the 5 forces of the East continent were all slaughtered by Chu Hang. This shook the entire East continent, and everyone was in a state of panic. However, to everyone's surprise, none of the forces in the East continent dared to criticize Chu Yang's brutality or anything else. There was not even the slightest sound of protest. They seemed to have all become deaf and mute, unable to hear or say anything. Gradually, the people of the East continent found out the truth: the Dog Slaughter Alliance. The Eastern continent's Beigong family, the Godly Knife Sect, the Blood Knife Sect, and the Bai family of the City of Raging Fire wanted to kill Chu Hang, forming the Dog Slaughtering Alliance. They were the ones who caused the murder in the deserted village. Such a fact made the people of the East continent calm down. Chu Hang was not angry for no reason and started a massacre. Of course, the East continent was still in an uproar because of this. Who can be blamed for courting death? Is that Demon King Chu someone to be trifled with? If you ask me, I think Demon King Chu is already being lenient. Otherwise, who knows how many people would have died in the East continent? Many people had such thoughts. If they were in Chu Hang's shoes, they would definitely wipe out the major powers of the East continent and then suppress the East continent for 3 years. Only then would they relax. I have to admit this point. Demon King Chu only killed those who were involved in the massacre in the deserted village and did not implicate the innocent. This is really the smallest scope of his actions. If he wants to use this as an excuse to go on a killing spree in the East continent, I'm afraid we won't be able to do anything. We'll just watch the show. In any case, Demon King Chu won't do anything to us. I can't take this anymore. I'm afraid Demon King Chu won't be so easy to deal with if this happens again. He's an extreme person and will always do things to the extreme. The ordinary people of the East continent were no longer worried, but the powers of the East continent, big and small, were very nervous. They were extremely worried that one day they would be wiped out like the Beigong family, the Godly Knife Sect, or the Blood Knife Sect. Chapter 22:11. Half a month later, things slowly calmed down. No one in the East continent dared to make a move. Then, The people of the East Continent heard that Chu Yang was leaving the East Continent for the Middle Continent again. This time, the people couldn't help but pay close attention. Would there be another dog-slaughtering alliance? Would Chu Yang be ambushed again? Chu Yang wasn't sure about this. After all, he had already fished once. Would he still be able to succeed if he fished again? Who knew? It wasn't impossible for him to do it again. At least, that was what Chu Yang thought. He still hadn't found Chen Zi. Chu Yang put in a lot of effort to search for Chen Zi. He didn't want the same thing to happen again. However, this was like looking for a needle in a haystack. It was too difficult to find Chen Zi. He couldn't even find Gong Sunlong. Chu Yang left again. This time, he was more prepared. He gathered all the people he cared about in the Eastern Purple Qi courtyard. Even with the protection of the Emperor artifact demonic clock, he was still worried. Once bitten, twice shy. To be honest, up until now, Chu Yang had never been able to erase the guilt in his heart towards the deserted village, towards Uncle Hu and sixth granduncle. He couldn't imagine what would happen to him if his big brother and the others were killed. However, he had no choice. He wanted to stay in the East Continent for a year or so. However, his big brother and the others didn't agree. Kui Xinhu and the others in the Eastern Wilderness didn't agree either. This wasn't the most important reason. If he didn't want to leave, who could stop him? The most important reason was that he couldn't protect the Eastern Wilderness forever. The people of the Eastern Wilderness had to rely on themselves, even if the price was heavy. I hope I made the right choice. I can't treat the Eastern Wilderness like a child just because of the barren village. I can't always take care of it and let it never grow up. Staying behind seemed very responsible, but in fact, it was a kind of irresponsible behavior. Everyone had to rely on themselves. The Eastern Wilderness was the same. Only then could the people of the Eastern Wilderness grow. Chu Yang left behind enough power and influence in the East Continent. Sima Jian, Jing Wuming, Sixth Courtyard, Thousand Devil Sec. He calculated one by one and felt that this should be enough. In the past, the 6 great academies of the Eastern Continent were already able to control it. Now, with the addition of the 10,000 Demon Sect and the Demonic Bell, if nothing unexpected happened, the Eastern Continent would not be able to cause too much trouble. That's it. Chu Yang finally figured it out and shook off these distracting thoughts. Then, he said, I hope we can still catch fish this time. Just like the first time, he walked slowly. It took him nearly 7 days to reach the place where the Ice Kuan and the Central Continent Saint fought, but no fish took the bait. Looks like I can't get rid of Chen Zi. This was a huge hidden danger. Chu Yang flew over the abyss with worry in his heart and rushed towards the Central Plains. Then, he saw the world barrier. The Central Plains could be said to be another world. When he completely left the Eastern Continent through a special passage and entered the Central Plains, he started a new journey and waited for a new chapter. However, he didn't know that a pair of eyes in the dark had been staring at him all this time. That dog will never expect that we won't do it in the Eastern Continent, but in the Central Plains. Chen Zi was very confident about this. Then, he said fiercely, this is the only way to catch it off guard. With 20 saints, I don't believe we can't kill that dog. 20 saints. Central Plains. Success or failure depended on this one move. Chapter 22:12. As soon as Chu Yang's figure disappeared from the world barrier, Chen Zi and Viper immediately sealed off the area, cutting off the East Continent's path to Zhengzhou. The price they had to pay for acting so rudely should not be small. However, they did not know why they had to do this. A space-time tunnel was opened between the East Continent and Zhengzhou. Through this space-time tunnel, one could easily enter Zhengzhou. The moment Chu Yang entered this space-time tunnel, he felt as if he was sitting on a rocket, flying rapidly into outer space. Instantly, he felt an extreme feeling of being overweight. The feeling of being overweight lasted for a while. Then, he felt as if he was sitting on a plane. When the plane took off into the sky, the angle of elevation and acceleration suddenly weakened. There was a feeling of weightlessness as if he was thrown out. During this process, he did not have the feeling of the stars moving, nor did he have the feeling of shuttling. When he was transported out of the space-time tunnel, the moment he entered a brand new world, he really rushed into outer space. It was as if he was in a state of complete vacuum. It was as if under the extremely low pressure, the pressure in his body became boundless. His blood was about to burn, explode, and completely suffocate. What the hell? Zhongzhou is outer space. Are all the people in Zhongzhou creatures from outer space? Chu Yang was caught off guard by this sudden change. He was thoroughly shocked. In the blink of an eye, he was once again in an extreme state of being overweight. He fell rapidly. Bang! With a muffled sound, Chu Yang fell to the ground. His bones were broken, and his tendons were broken. His whole body was in intense pain. In the past, he said that the ground was like tofu. Not only did it not have a big hole, it was even unscathed. The ground of Zhongzhou seemed to be made of divine iron. When he fell on it, he almost lost half of his life. He saw stars. His head hit the ground like an egg smashing on a steel plate. In a daze, his brain juice splattered out like egg white and egg yolk. The difference between the East Continent and Zhongzhou is so big. I'm going to be killed the moment I enter Zhongzhou. Chu Yang's heart shook. He had already been to many places. He had been to the various divine worlds, and he had even been to those strange worlds. However, he had never encountered such a bizarre situation. The only good news was that he finally sensed the air, but the air was abnormally heavy. It did not seem to be a gas, but a kind of liquid, a kind of solid. It was like pieces of steel plates, pressing in from all directions. It was even more terrifying than being at the bottom of the sea. The space-time in the central province shouldn't be so abnormal. Should I have fallen into the enemy's trap? This was a huge possibility, so he ignored the injuries all over his body and struggled to stand up, but it was extremely difficult. Kaka. His bones creaked as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. He trembled as he stood up bit by bit. In the end, he wanted to completely straighten his body, but he couldn't. What kind of trap is this? Why is it so terrifying? A trap for the earthly sovereign, or even the great emperor? They think too highly of me, but that's not right. There doesn't seem to be any fluctuations in the surroundings. Chu Yang was really confused. He could only ask the Ice Kuan for help. Kuan, what's the situation now? The East Continent is a pond, and Zhongzhou is a land. Master is now like a fish that has just come from the water to the land. Naturally, there will be a process of adaptation. The Ice Kuan's description was really accurate. Wasn't Chu Yang like this just now? At first, he felt like he was in a vacuum and couldn't breathe. When he sensed the air, it was as if he didn't breathe through gills, but through lungs like a creature on the land. Chapter 22:13. Kuan, are you sure there's no danger around? However, Chu Yang still had some doubts. This was because he had even been to the strange world where the four symbols were treated as poisonous snakes and soaked in medicinal wine. That strange world was of a high enough level, but such a situation did not occur. There's definitely no danger, Bing Kuan explained. The central region of the heavenly soul world should be the same as the group god realm. Group god realm? According to this, Chu Yang had only taken a stroll around the periphery of the world of gods when he went to the world of gods. But even if this made sense, what about that strange world? Kuan, is that strange world lower than the central region and the group god realm? How was this possible? Bing Kuan was also puzzled. He didn't enter that strange world with Chu Yang. Instead, he was in charge of the escape route from the outside. Although he wasn't clear about the specifics of that strange world, how could that strange world be inferior to the continent of the gods or the group world of the gods? Not to mention the four symbols that were soaked in medicinal wine, even his ancestor could only be soaked in medicinal wine. Master, this old servant is not clear about this. However, it is normal for the central region to have such a stable space-time. This is normal. Chu Yang's eyes widened and he cursed, then, isn't the East region much worse than the central region? Master, is this the case? Bing Kuan asked. The central region is the center of the heavenly soul world. But it shouldn't be that bad. I was almost killed when I just entered. It was not just a difference, it was a difference between heaven and earth. Master, this is only the beginning. You will know when you feel it. Chu Yang cursed. His mood was extremely bad. As a result, the difference between him and his love rivals in the central region was too big. What the Ice Kuan said, he quickly realized. Originally, he was about to break through to the Nirvana realm in the East region. However, under the pressure of the laws of the central region, his realm dropped. Transcendence realm. Spirit realm. Soul wheel realm. Only when his cultivation level dropped to the first level of the Chi Soul stage did the momentum slow down and finally stop. It wasn't just his cultivation level that was affected. His physical body, his soul, and everything else were being ruthlessly suppressed and pushed back madly. In the strange world, Chu Yang's physical body had become a god, and he was directly beaten back to his original form. The rules that intertwined in his physical body were all suppressed and shrunk back, directly shrinking into a cocoon of light. His spiritual strength also plummeted, instantly dropping from the spiritual strength of a sage to the strength of a level 5 array master. Peng. His 100 heavenly abodes were also affected. The eternal divine sun, which represented his godly flame, became blurry bit by bit before completely disappearing. Within his 10 heavenly abodes, the 800 miles of flames were completely extinguished. His divine flame was completely extinguished. The regression was too intense, far beyond what he had imagined. Chu Yang's pupils quivered. He finally realized the gap between him and the Central Plains and finally knew why Shangguan Lan's uncle looked down on him. No matter how outstanding he was in the East Continent, it didn't mean anything. He was nothing in the Central Continent. How could this be? He couldn't accept the huge difference in strength. Master, this is normal. It must be the case for ordinary people, but for Master, this is just the beginning. Chu Yang didn't understand Bing Kuan's words. However, he was certain that once the people of the East Continent entered the Central region, their realms would be greatly suppressed. Chapter 22:14. It was definitely not easy for Bing Kuan to kill the 18 sages from the Central region. This also showed Bing Kuan's strength. As for the abyss in the East region, it was nothing. It was already good enough that the East region did not collapse. He could not imagine the strength of Xia Jie and Sage Peng. He deeply understood the reverence of the East region towards the Central region. Chu Yang naturally knew that this kind of suppression was only temporary. He would certainly be able to recover through cultivation. But it would take time. In fact, his thinking was too simple. Many people who entered the Central region from the East region could not recover after their cultivation was suppressed. Moreover, it would take a long time to improve their cultivation. It could be said that those people who were heavenly talents in the East region were directly knocked down from the clouds after entering the Central region. They became ordinary people from heavenly talents and monstrous talents. Their cultivation was extremely slow and it was extremely difficult for them to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Among them, only a few heavenly talents were still heavenly talents, and monstrous talents were still monstrous talents. Under the pressure of the rules of the world of the Middle Continent, Chu Yang's body sometimes looked like a white hole silently emitting divine radiance. Sometimes, he looked like a black hole swallowing everything. The Destiny Twins' martial spirits appeared, and the air that was pressuring him like countless divine iron instantly became normal. The Destiny Twins' martial spirits suddenly stretched out their hands and grabbed at the void. They directly tore off 2 large pieces of heaven and earth, which were then devoured by the Destiny Twins' martial spirits. It was like tearing off 2 pieces of flesh. The torn space was unable to fuse together, and blood immediately burst out from it, forming a majestic rain that poured down. Rumble. At this time, something seemed to have collapsed in the deepest part of Chu Yang's body. Spirit energy surged in from all directions, and the blood dripping from the crack in the void was also swallowed into his body. Heaven and earth were like beasts. 2 large pieces of meat were cut off, and blood was flowing down. Chu Yang's eyes widened. He was almost petrified on the spot. Everything was too unbelievable. Kuan, is this what you meant just now? Master, this is beyond my imagination. The Ice Kuan was also shocked. He thought that Chu Yang's Destiny Twins martial spirits would make a move, but he did not expect it to be so tyrannical. The Destiny Twins martial spirits did not make a move, but once they made a move, it was truly incredible. Woo-woo tilde suddenly, a sobbing sound came from the heavens and earth. The sound was extremely loud. It was like the sound of the heavenly Tao. The heavens are crying. Chu Yang was a bit confused. He felt that it was true. The heavens are indeed crying, the heavens are crying. Hearing the Ice Kuan's voice, his face was actually real. He was completely speechless. He didn't know what to say and couldn't say anything. At the same time, his cultivation realm quickly recover. Ascending soul reincarnation realm spirit stage. In the blink of an eye, his cultivation had recovered reign. Originally, the laws of the heavens and the heavenly Tao of reincarnated. The only difference was that the laws of the heavens and earth had undergone a qualitative change. The laws of the heavens and earth were originally thin threads, but now they were as thick as chains. At this moment, due to the qualitative change of the laws, Chu Yang had an illusion. His body was infinitely enlarged. He was as tall as the heavens and even broke through the heavens. He stepped on the earth and broke through the heavens. The heavens and earth were like a cage that was broken by him. Haha. He suddenly felt that he was omnipotent. He completely recovered and laughed out loud. Damn heavens of the central region, I'll beat you until you cry no, I'll cut off 2 pieces of your meat and stir-fry them. Waraha. Chapter 22:15. What could the Ice Kuan say? What was Chu Yang like before? What was he like now? He could only spread out his hands to express his helplessness. However, he still opened his mouth. Master, don't you know that if you cut off 2 pieces of meat and stir-fry them, you will definitely be noticed by the supreme figures? Now is the time to run. Suddenly, Chu Yang felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His laughter came to an abrupt end. His frozen expression was incomparably ridiculous and extremely comical. It was as if he had suddenly fallen from heaven to hell. His mood could be said to be extremely sour. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. If he was noticed by the supreme figures, even if he didn't die, he would be captured for research. Kuan, run quickly. Chu Yang's legs were naturally not as good as the Ice Kuan's legs. Only the Ice Kuan could run. The Ice Kuan couldn't help but roll his eyes. He didn't get any benefits and still had to work hard. In addition, he wanted to run away with Chu Yang, but he couldn't control the Destiny Twins' martial spirits. Master, those 2 ancestors, this old servant has no other way. I'll have to trouble you with your legs. Pa. Chu Yang patted his head. When he was about to run away, a loud rumbling sound came from his 100 heavenly abodes. Heaven and earth were turned upside down. The 100 heavenly abodes were about to collapse. They were shrinking rapidly. One moment, they were as small as dust, and the next moment, they were as big as stars. There is another ancestor here. He immediately knew the source. It was the big cauldron that he had obtained from the strange world. This guy who had never made a move actually came out for a stroll at this time. With a swoosh, it flew out from the deepest part of the 100 heavenly abodes and fell down. With a loud rumbling sound, it directly smashed the ground and broke the world barrier of the central divine world. With a fierce suction, the world's origin of the central region was sucked out like a torrent and entered the big cauldron. I'll go. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. This thing was too ferocious. It was definitely stirring up trouble. When he thought about how this cauldron was discovered as well, his entire body broke out in cold sweat, his soul almost leaving his body. As a result, even when so much of the world's source energy poured into his body, he couldn't feel the slightest bit of happiness. Bing Kuan was also stunned. He didn't realize that the aura around him had changed. His cultivation of the gods' world swept out. It was no longer billowing demonic energy, and he was no longer rejected by the heavenly soul world. All of a sudden, screams of misery rang out from the sky. After that, it was as though the corpses of heavenly deities were falling from the sky. The scene was extremely shocking. Luckily, they weren't real and were only illusions. These were all swallowed up by the cauldron. Roar. A golden dragon of unknown length struggled in the sky, but it was of no use at all. It continued to fall rapidly and was directly swallowed by the cauldron in one gulp. The divine will of a supreme being. When Chu Yang and Bing Kuan noticed it, both of them were scared half to death. These supreme beings had already paid attention to this place. Fortunately, this cauldron was extremely terrifying. It didn't seem to allow others to spy on it or other things. It directly wiped out all the divine will. As for what exactly happened, how this cauldron was triggered, and how it wiped out the divine will of those supreme beings, Chu Yang and Bing Kuan didn't know. Perhaps, the reason why this cauldron was triggered is because of the Destiny Twins' martial spirit. Chu Yang guessed in his heart, but he didn't have any basis. He wanted to run away immediately, but he couldn't bear to part with this cauldron. This cauldron was definitely a supreme treasure. Chapter 22:16. The design of the Path of Questioning Heart illusion was extremely simple. It was just a road, a misty road. When one's eyes fell on it, they would soon be distorted and see distorted versions of themselves. Simple but extraordinary. Chu Yang also found that the formation in the Path of Questioning Heart illusion was extremely complicated. He didn't see the whole picture, so he really didn't know the power of this formation for a while. After he stepped in, he immediately felt that there was a strange power that silently drilled into his consciousness. Immediately, he couldn't help but blurt out the two words Chu Yang. Liu Xuan Huan. After a slight pause, Chu Yang shouted out his fake name. The old man outside couldn't help but be surprised. It was just a slight pause. It didn't seem like much, but the old man sensed a lot from it. He had seen far too many tests like this, and all those who entered would immediately blurt out their names. Chu Yang was the first person who could pause for a moment. He hesitated for a moment. The name he said might not necessarily be his real name. This kid is not simple. The old man smoked a cigarette, his eyes flashing. He carefully calculated in his heart. He is now at the peak of the transcendence realm. According to the suppression of the rules of heaven and earth in the central state, he was very likely a saint before. He reached the saint realm at such a young age. In that corner of the East State, he is definitely a supreme figure. There was another person next to the old man. It was the young man who had come after Chu Yang. He was roughly 19 or 20 years old. He was tall and sturdy, and very muscular. It could be said that he was tall and strong. But, he looked travel-worn, and almost like a beggar. This was not his fault. The no-man's land was too vast. If it weren't for the Ice Kuan, Chu Yang would probably look like him. His realm was similar to Chu Yang's. His cultivation was at the 8th tier of the transcendence realm. According to the old man's speculation, he was very likely a saint before he came to the central state. Li Dazhuang. His name was very simple, and so was his person. He was completely a child of a poor family. I have both parents in my family. My father is Liu Yunlong, my mother is Liu Yi, and my brother is Liu Qingyun. In the dreamland, Chu Yang was also questioned about his family situation. He slightly changed the names of his parents, his elder brother, Chu Fei, and Chu Na. After defending against the initial invasion of that strange power, everything became much easier. Chu Yang dealt with it with ease. However, even after he answered all the questions the old man had asked him, things still weren't over. That strange energy was becoming more and more shocking. Chu Yang didn't want to appear too shocking, so he allowed some of the energy to enter. His consciousness immediately started to distort, and all kinds of illusions appeared. These illusions couldn't affect Chu Yang, but he knew that this stage of the test would definitely make people lose their consciousness and reveal the secrets in their hearts. Thus, he spouted a bunch of nonsense. The proudest thing I've ever done is to make 1,000 women fall in love with me at the same time. I'm the one who's loved by all. I'm a heaven-blessed martial artist, a great emperor. There will definitely be more women in the central state who will fall in love with me. I don't want much. 10,000 is enough. Waha, the central state, I'm coming. How lonely it is to be invincible. Alone at the peak, the cold wind constantly blowing. My loneliness. Who can understand me? The old man suddenly couldn't continue smoking. He thought to himself, this Liu Xuanhuan is too narcissistic. If he's not confused in the dreamland, can't he say something else? He suddenly felt his teeth itch. This guy is really cocky. Li Dazhuang's eyes widened. He muttered, this is bad. Once I enter, I'm afraid I'll reveal all the filth in my heart. Chapter 22:17. This hurdle was actually the second stage of the questioning heart road. When Chu Yang passed through this stage and entered the third stage, that strange power suddenly became incomparably tyrannical. It went on a rampage, and barged into his mind in a barbaric manner. It wanted to check his memories. Buzz, buzz. The space between Chu Yang's eyebrows lit up, and a big sun rose. It clashed with that strange force, and created ripples in the air. Then, it dispersed the misty fog of the illusory Wenshin Road. This Liu Xuanhuan is really not simple. With a clatter, the old man was shocked. He took a puff of his cigarette and suppressed his shock. Almost no one could resist the third stage of the test. However, in the past year, 2 people from the East continent had already done it. That person seems to be called Qian Zi. It had been a long time, and the old man couldn't remember it clearly. However, he still remembered the general situation. Qian Zi barged in directly and didn't let the force enter his mind to search his memories. What is he going to do? The old man was very curious. Qian Zi did barge through, but it was extremely fast. At this moment, Chu Yang also had a bit of a headache. That strange power was very astonishing. He felt that it shouldn't be a problem to resist it. However, if he blocked this strange power, what he had said before might be suspected by others. In the central province, he reckoned that he would definitely do some shocking things. Thus, if he left behind a flaw, others would be able to use it to their advantage. That would be bad. I can only make a fake one to fool them. Chu Yang was depressed and began to construct a fake memory. It was definitely not easy. Fortunately, he had mastered the 3 profound meanings of criminal detention, soul-slaying, and divine soul-devouring. It was not the first time that he had extracted the divine soul of his enemies. Otherwise, it would be impossible to construct a fake memory. Of course, it also needed time. Chu Yang stood there and time passed little by little. 1 incense stick's worth of time, 2 incense sticks worth of time, 3 incense sticks worth of time. The old man was already stunned. After Chu Yang persisted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he was completely stunned. This was something that had never happened before. In the third stage of the test, one's spiritual power had to be at the level of a sage to be able to withstand it completely. However, it was almost impossible for people from the East continent to have spiritual power at the level of a sage after being suppressed by the rules of heaven and earth in the central continent. Unless, before he entered the central plains, his cultivation was not only at the saint stage, but also at the earthly sovereign stage. An earth sovereign realm cultivator at such a young age? Chu Yang looked to be at most 20 years old. The old man really couldn't imagine how Chu Yang did it. Such a person was definitely a dragon among men, a man above men. Even in the central state, he would certainly attract the attention of the world. The old man took a long time to calm his emotions. During this time, Chu Yang finally constructed a fake memory, passed the third stage, and appeared in front of the old man. Elder, this Wenshin Road is really amazing. I accidentally exposed my stink just now. Please don't laugh at me. Chu Yang wiped the cold sweat and smiled with a trace of shame. Li Dazhuang, who was beside him, hurriedly echoed in a muffled voice, yes, yes. Elder, if I stink later, please don't tell others about it. This cunning boy. If I hadn't been stationed here all year round and knew the Wenshin Road clearly, I would have been deceived by him. Chapter 22:18. After Li Dazhuang entered the illusory realm and shouted his name, the old man suddenly said to Chu Yang, "Boy, what are you showing off for? Do you think I can't see through it?" Chu Yang's eyelids twitched and he thought, why is this old guy so sharp? The old man smoked his cigarette and laughed, revealing his yellow teeth. "Kid, what kind of secret do you have?" Chu Yang saw that he couldn't hide it, so he simply spread his hands and said, "Old man, do you know what privacy is?" At this time, Li Dazhuang screamed in the illusory realm, "Xiao Kui, don't hit me, I definitely didn't mean to peek, I just accidentally saw it. I'm telling the truth, listen to my explanation." Then, Li Dazhuang's voice suddenly changed, and he stammered nervously, "Miss Wang, you're really beautiful." The sound of him swallowing his saliva could be heard, and he even began to take off his clothes. "Miss Wang, what are you talking about? Even if you're a brothel girl, I won't look down on you." What happened next was even more exciting. Li Dazhuang seemed to be honest, but he was actually very cunning. To put it nicely, he had the virtue of pretending to be stupid. "Old man, did you see it?" Chu Yang immediately pointed at Li Dazhuang in the illusory realm and said, "I just don't want to do that. You have to know that I'm a genius, and I'm not only favored by one woman, but many, many." Such an excuse was barely acceptable. However, the more the old man looked at Chu Yang's smug face, the more he found it unpleasant. He directly blew a mouthful of smoke in Chu Yang's face and directly said, "Boy, do you want me to write the truth or what?" Cunning old man, Chu Yang thought to himself. He had a headache, and it seemed that this flaw would be left behind. "Look at what you're saying, I'm an honest person, so of course I'll write it as it is." "Really?" The old man had a strange smile on his face. Chu Yang didn't know how this old man saw his flaw. "That's how it should be. Then I will do as you wish. Many thanks, old sir. Old sir's magic power is boundless, and your life is as long as the heavens." Chu Yang flattered. "I've finally heard some words from a human." As he spoke, the old man threw over a tael of silver and said, "Take it, this is my reward for my good grandson." When Chu Yang heard this, his heart calmed down. He roughly understood the other party's intentions. Seeing how outstanding he was, the other party wanted to befriend him. He smiled even more brilliantly, but he was very disdainful. "Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? Not to mention anything else, just based on my face, I can easily get one tael of silver from a little girl. Keep bragging." The old man said disdainfully, "I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to live anymore." Li Dazhuang's miserable howl came over, interrupting the conversation between the old man and Chu Yang. His path of reflection ended very quickly, and he found himself taking off all his clothes. He covered his face and screamed in embarrassment. Chu Yang almost believed him. "I say, fellow Daoist, we've broken through the heavens and created a new humiliation. We're clearly extremely happy, so why do you have to act like you're about to die? Isn't this weakening the elegance of our generation? This is a slut." Li Dazhuang immediately determined that Chu Yang was a slut, and in the blink of an eye revealed his true nature. He smiled and cupped his hands towards Chu Yang. "Fellow cultivator, when will you go to the brothel? Fellow cultivator, this genius has character." Chu Yang used his mana to form a folding fan. With a snap, he opened it and elegantly fanned himself. "Hee." Li Dazhuang laughed evilly. "Fellow cultivator, your character is good or bad?" "Bullshit." Chu Yang immediately glared. "Dogly, which eye of yours saw that I specialize in seducing little girls and lonely women? I'm a dignified friend of women." "Fart." The old man and Li Dazhuang immediately burst out laughing. The person in front of them was completely hopeless. After a bout of shamelessness, Chu Yang and his fellow cultivator bid farewell to the old man and left in a carefree manner. Chapter 22:19. It was spring in Zhongzhou. Originally, the sky was gloomy, but the spring rain suddenly came quietly. The small town in front of them was immediately covered in a misty fog. However, the spring before Chu Yang's eyes was dry and dull. He didn't see the rippling spring water, the chirping swallows, and the willow trees. There was only a small town. Looking from afar, he could see that the town was sparsely populated. Chu Yang was like a well-dressed playboy. He was very satisfied with himself. He raised his head, puffed out his chest, and strode forward. At the side, Li Dazhuang suddenly felt that he had become a contrast. He couldn't wait to immediately change out of his dirty clothes and put on a decent appearance. Chu Yang came from afar. From afar, it looked like he came from the horizon. You two refugees, stop right there. At the entrance of the small town, there was a checkpoint. There were 2 officials guarding it. When Chu Yang and Li Dazhuang arrived, a burly man who was as tall as Li Dazhuang immediately rushed in front of them and blocked their path. First, those who cheat, and steal will die, the official said in a low voice. He was extremely disgusted with Chu Yang and Li Dazhuang. So, his attitude towards them was extremely bad. Second, I suggest you go to the refugee camp. Third, I'm not joking. Fourth, you may soon die under my blade. Fifth, that's all I have to say. You have to bear the consequences, the burly official said in a low voice. He was full of anger as he grabbed the hilt of the blade at his waist. He left these few words and fiercely warned the 2 of them before leaving. He came quickly and left quickly. During this process, Chu Yang and Li Dazhuang only felt the other party's disgust. Until now, they didn't say a word. However, they were treated like criminals and were even warned. This was definitely not a good thing. Ordinary people wouldn't feel good when faced with this kind of situation. Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and said in his heart, "It seems that my situation in Zhengzhou will also be very bad." Then, he heard Li Dazhuang's stomach grumbling. He immediately felt hungry. Li Dazhuang looked like an honest person, but he sized up the strength of the 2 officials. The one who was like him was only at the 3rd level of the Transcendence Realm, while the other was at the 5th level of the Transcendence Realm. He seemed to be unhappy and wanted to teach these 2 officials a lesson. However, he was unfamiliar with this place and didn't understand the situation, so he hesitated. Chu Yang placed his hands behind his back and whistled as he left. The Central State Divine Dynasty was also known as the Jin Dynasty, and the Divine Emperor was also known as the Jin Emperor. The entire Jin Dynasty was like an ancient feudal dynasty. The only difference was that the emperor, officials, and people here all had incredible cultivation. Chu Yang already knew about this from Shangguan Lan, who had great prestige in Zhengzhou. He didn't want to slap the official's face, and then slap the official's face, because it wasn't worth it. In the end, Li Dazhuang also gave up the idea of teaching the 2 officials a lesson. As soon as the 2 of them entered the town, everyone who met them looked at them with extreme disgust. Many people even directly spoke to them. 2 more refugees. All refugees are scum. You 2 scum definitely won't live past tomorrow. Bastards, is Zhengzhou a place you should come to? Go back and be animals. Bah, who do you think you are? Chu Yang didn't know what he had done to receive such treatment. Of course, Li Dazhuang didn't know either. Refugees, the refugee camp is over there. Don't let me see you anywhere else. Bastards, the refugee camp is over there. Don't mess around and dirty the place. Chapter 22:20. Li Dazhuang's stomach growled again. Chu Yang also felt even hungrier. In the East Continent, he wouldn't have such a situation because he didn't need to eat. Eating was just for enjoyment. However, in the Central Province, he quickly felt hungry. He was so hungry that his internal organs were rebelling. From the reactions of the people in the small town, Chu Yang not only felt a deep sense of disgust, he also faintly sensed that after coming to the small town, many of these so-called refugees had done extremely disgusting things. Let's not care about this. Let's first fill up the internal organs. At this time, Chu Yang finally realized the importance of that 1 tael of silver. He also foresaw that without this 1 tael of silver, he wouldn't even be able to eat a bun or sesame seed cake. At Chu Yang's level, he didn't care about the secular world's firewood, rice, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, tea, silver, and so on. He definitely wouldn't be bothered by these things. However, in the Central Province, it seemed to be a top priority. How could he have any silver on him when he had just entered the Central Province? A single penny stumped a hero. He also faintly understood why the 2 officials warned them. Perhaps some people who had just entered the Central Province felt embarrassed after feeling hungry. If they didn't cheat, steal, rob, or kill people for money. Under the watchful eyes of the people, Chu Yang and Li Dazhuang arrived in front of the steaming bun shop. Li Dazhuang's stomach growled louder and louder. Hearing such a sound, the steamed bun seller was extremely happy. He welcomed them with a smile and then opened his mouth to say how delicious his steamed bun was and how many he wanted. However, the steamed bun seller didn't. When he suddenly saw Chu Yang and Li Dazhuang come over, he immediately revealed a disgusted expression and coldly said, "Refugees, get lost. Get lost immediately. Don't hinder my business. You seem to be very sure that I can't afford your steamed bun." Chu Yang very clearly read the mentality of the steamed bun seller. You are all paupers. You don't even know what money is. What will you use to buy my steamed bun? Use your cheap lives. The steamed bun seller roared and pointed in the direction of the refugee camp. That's where you should be. Pauper, get lost. Li Dazhuang's eyes widened like copper bells. The steamed bun seller immediately rolled up his sleeves and said, "What's wrong, you pauper? You want to rob and kill? Come on." Originally, Chu Yang and Li Dazhuang were already on guard against them. Suddenly, many people swarmed over. Immediately, many people were filled with righteous indignation, cursing and swearing. "Refugees, are you going to be so arrogant again? Try it, I'll skin you alive. You dog, this is the central state. How dare you behave so atrociously here?" Chu Yang glanced at Li Dazhuang and immediately distanced himself from Li Dazhuang. He cupped his fist and said to the crowd, "Everyone, please don't misunderstand. I am a scholar. As for this blockhead, I have nothing to do with him. He was really a kindred spirit. He instantly sold him out." Li Dazhuang could be considered to have seen Chu Yang's true nature. Before the people of the small town started to curse, Chu Yang cleverly showed the silver tail in the palm of his hand. He smiled at the crowd and said, "Everyone, I really came to buy steamed buns. I definitely didn't come to cause trouble. After all, I am a scholar. I still know etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame. This bastard." Li Dazhuang realized that Chu Yang used this silver tail to achieve great results. He was almost famous in the small town. Chapter 22-21. This brother, I see that your cooking skills are exquisite. The taste of your buns must also be superb. I wonder how many buns I can buy with one tael of silver. Chu Yang asked with a smile, "I am a scholar, and I am embarrassed recently. Please give me a cheaper price. I thank you in advance." As he spoke, he bowed to the bun seller. "You really have money?" The bun seller was very surprised, and so were the onlookers. A refugee with money seemed to be a rare occurrence. Their reaction made Li Dazhuang want to beat Chu Yang to death in an instant. He even wanted to replace him. A mere tael of silver could be used to show off. What kind of world was this? Of course I have money. I am a scholar. Although I am a little poor, I can still rely on myself. Hearing Chu Yang once again emphasize his status as a scholar, Li Dazhuang could only look on enviously. A scholar is a scholar. No wonder you are different from the majority of refugees even though you are a refugee. After the bun seller confirmed that the money was real, his expression eased a lot. A scholar is different after all. If every refugee was a scholar, we would be much more peaceful. Isn't that so? If it wasn't for the heavens whale that cut off the flow of refugees a month ago, who knows how many families would have been robbed or even killed? The sound of discussion confirmed Chu Yang's guess. A scholar is really different. Even if he is poor, he still dresses well and is elegant. If we didn't know in advance, who would believe that he is a refugee? Suddenly, someone in the crowd compared Chu Yang to Li Dazhuang. The other refugee is completely different. One look and you can tell that he is a martial artist. He has no ability, but he is also unreasonable. He robbed and killed at the slightest provocation. He looks simple and honest, but he is no different from those refugees. He is also a beast. He is dirty and stupid. Wouldn't it be better to just die? Whose eyes are you dirtying? Who are you trying to disgust? Li Dazhuang was extremely disgusted. Chu Yang, this bastard, had stepped on his corpse and was about to become a model of justice. If this could be tolerated, what else could be tolerated? That tael of silver is mine. He was also the one who told me to snatch the buns to eat. Li Dazhuang put on a pitiful and foolish look as he explained, which shocked Chu Yang. Fortunately, although Li Dazhuang looked foolish enough, his words were definitely not foolish. You. Chu Yang was so angry that he was trembling. He pointed at Li Dazhuang and said, "Your intentions are really sinister. You actually poured all the dirty water on me. How vicious you are. An expert." When Li Dazhuang saw Chu Yang's response, he suddenly felt a burst of pressure. If he couldn't win against this thing, he would be in trouble. However, he had no chance at all. "Brother," Chu Yang immediately said to the steamed bun seller, "just now when I came with this bastard, did you see me instruct him? When he threatened you, he had a silly look on his face." Li Dazhuang immediately felt a sense of crisis. This Liu Xuanhuan really had a sharp tongue. As soon as the steamed bun seller opened his mouth, he would be exposed. Just as he was about to fight back, Chu Yang beat him to it. Filled with righteous indignation, he pointed at Li Dazhuang and shouted, "Bastard, I was originally a scholar. I didn't look down on you and came with you. Who would have thought that you would be so sinister? My dog eyes were really blind. Hey, who's the one calling themselves a scholar?" In the midst of the commotion, a sarcastic voice pierced through. Soon after, a young master, surrounded by a group of followers, walked straight towards Chu Yang. Chapter 22-22. With an evil smile on his face, the young master walked straight to Chu Yang and stood in front of him. His body emitted a faint fragrance as he sized up Chu Yang with ridicule. His figure was thin, and he was dressed in luxurious clothes. His skin was soft and tender, and his eyes were slightly sunken. At first glance, he looked like someone who drank too much. The group of followers behind the young master also had a mocking expression as they sized up Chu Yang. The originally noisy crowd had completely quieted down at this moment, and their gazes all fell on the young master. "Hey, refugee, you really do look like a scholar." The young master swept a glance and found that Chu Yang was much more handsome than him, and his temperament was also more refined. A look of disgust flashed across his eyes. Immediately, he looked at Chu Yang with an evil smile. "However, do you know what a scholar is? Don't think that just because you know a few words, you are a scholar, understand?" He. Li Dazhuang couldn't help but be secretly happy. "Liu Yao, you are too high profile. My undying fellow Daoist has come to mess with you this time." He was overjoyed and also sensed that this young master was at the third level of the Nirvana realm. The strength of the followers behind him was at least at the life and death realm. It was more than enough to deal with Chu Yang. Chu Yang used his magic power to form a folding fan. He opened it with a snap and gently shook it. Then, he said in a cultured and refined manner, "Does this brother want to test me a little? May I ask for your name? Is my name something a lowly person like you should know? Are you worthy?" The young master suddenly became ruthless and stared at Chu Yang with a sneer. "It is your fortune that I can talk to you. So vulgar, it seems like you are not a scholar." Chu Yang gently shook his folding fan. He was calm and composed without a trace of anger. He tried his best to show the face of a scholar, then said, "You are jealous, but I understand your feelings. You are not a scholar, so naturally you are jealous of a scholar like me. I understand. What do you know?" The young master's face turned red. Chu Yang had poked at his sore spot. Of course, it wasn't because of his studies, but because he was really jealous of Chu Yang. Chu Yang did not pay any attention to him. Once again, he displayed the elegance of a scholar and slowly recited, "Rich people don't need to buy fertile land. There are thousands of rice grains in books. There is no need to set up a house of gold in a book. There is no need to hate when you go out without a rickshaw, for there are many horses in the book. There is no need to hate when you marry a wife without match. There are women in books who are as beautiful as jade. If a man wants to fulfill his life's ambition, he will diligently study the 6 classics before the window." The crowd burst into an uproar as soon as he finished speaking. This refugee is indeed a scholar. Needless to say, to be able to recite such a poem just by opening his mouth, what else can he be if not a scholar? If that's the case, Then there really is a scholar among the refugees. This is unprecedented. At least, I've never met one before. No wonder he has one tael of silver in his hands. How can a scholar rob, kill, or commit such unjust acts? When Li Diezhuang heard the discussions of the crowd, he almost could not help but curse out loud. Fortunately, he managed to hold it in. However, he was still surprised in his heart. This thing, he really is a scholar. He was prepared, he really was prepared. He had long been prepared to show off in the central state. That's why even though we are on the same path, in the end, I'm still a little bit behind him. For Chu Yang to be able to recite a poem, in his opinion, this was definitely a kind of ability. Moreover, it was a kind of great ability. The young master was already angry, but when he heard Chu Yang recite slowly, he could not help but be stunned. This lowly commoner is actually a scholar. He did not dare to believe it. Studying was said to be useless. Martial strength was the truth. Therefore, other than the central state, who would study? Chapter 22-23. The child felt even more uncomfortable and jealous. Not only was this lowly person better looking than him, but he was also not as good as this lowly person at studying. You think you're a scholar because you can recite a crooked poem? How ridiculous! The child reprimanded, "Don't insult the word scholar. You lowly person, if you dare to call yourself a scholar again, I'll break your legs, no, I'll gouge out your eyes and cut off your tongue." Chu Yang was naturally not afraid. He had already had crooked thoughts. And this child was forcing him like this, which was exactly what he wanted to see. Because he was in need of money, very, very much. A hero would be stumped by a penny. In Zhongzhou, it was impossible to not have money. And this child was simply here to give money to Chu Yang. What's so difficult about studying? What's there to be jealous of? Chu Yang waved his folding fan and advised gracefully, "As long as you're willing to study and study hard, why can't you become a scholar?" He immediately said to the crowd, "Everyone, there's nothing special about being a scholar. Studying doesn't seem to be of much use. On the contrary, everyone is eager to learn martial arts. So if you put your passion for martial arts into studying, you won't have to worry about not being able to become a scholar." Who didn't understand this? But they didn't have enough time to practice martial arts, so how could they have the energy to study? This was also one of the reasons why scholars in Zhongzhou were noble. Generally speaking, if one's martial arts cultivation was not weak and he was a scholar, his talent would definitely not be too bad. So, for such people, everyone would respect them. Later, the identity of a scholar was used by the Jin dynasty, so his status was even higher. Chu Yang only knew this at the end. Of course, he wasn't done yet. After speaking to the crowd, he turned to the young master and said, "Similarly, this applies to you as well. As long as you put some effort into studying, you won't have to worry about not being able to become a scholar." When did I say that I'm not a scholar? The young master flew into a rage, and directly roared. He angrily pointed at Chu Yang and loudly said, "I've already said, lowly commoner, don't insult the three-word scholar. Otherwise, I'll dig out your eyes and cut off your tongue." Domineering. Unreasonable. Chu Yang's expression turned cold. Are all the scholars in Central State like this? How disappointing. There was a moment of silence. The scope of this attack was really too wide. That young master had completely thrown away the face of the Central Province's scholars. Moreover, he had done it in front of a refugee. If word of this got out, who knew how many scholars in Central State would be furious? The young master sensed the change in the crowd. His arrogance immediately weakened, and fear even appeared in his eyes. This was not his usual nonsense. Instead, he was using the scholars as an example. If he made the scholars lose face, not to mention other places, even the local scholars would not forgive him. There are good and bad people in Central State. Brother, we've made a fool of ourselves. From the crowd, a handsome and elegant young man, who was not much older than Chu Yang, stood out as soon as he spoke. At this moment, he cupped his fists and bowed to Chu Yang. Chu Yang returned the bow. "Greetings, brother." At the same time, he also admitted, "I went a little overboard with my words just now. Please forgive me." Chapter 22-24. Ma Kongchuan, who are you calling filthy? Being belittled by the youth in front of others, the young master was furious to the point of madness. He was about to lose his mind. Zhu Yu, did I say something wrong? The youth sneered. Don't think that just because you've read books but don't understand the principles in them, you're a scholar. You've really thrown away the face of us scholars. Ma Kongchuan, Zhu Yu. Chu Yang knew the names of these two people, and couldn't help but frown. With Ma Kongchuan's appearance, he was afraid that his plan to get some money from Zhu Yu would be ruined. Zhu Yu trembled with anger, but he could not do anything to Ma Kongchuan. He was even afraid of Ma Kongchuan, but he was not willing to accept this. After thinking hard, he immediately thought of a way. After that, he thought that everything was caused by that lowly commoner. His heart was filled with hatred. He looked at Chu Yang threateningly and said to Ma Kongchuan, "This lowly commoner is not a scholar. He calls himself a scholar, so why can't I teach him a lesson or two?" Me. Ma Kongchuan coldly snorted, "If he's not a scholar, then you're one, Zhu Yu. That poem just now, how can you compose it?" Ma Kongchuan was attracted by Chu Yang's slow recitation. Is being able to compose a poem a scholar? Zhu Yu stubbornly insisted. He has a literary position. In the continent center, one could only be considered a scholar if one had a literary position. As for the literary position, one had to pass the examination of the Jin dynasty. Chu Yang had a general impression of it. Scholar, Xiuzai, Duran, and so on were all literary positions. Ma Kongchuan did not immediately refute Zhu Yu. Instead, he cupped his fists towards Chu Yang and said, "May I know this brother's name?" "This one is Liu Xuanhuan. Brother Liu, you've just arrived at the central state, how can you obtain a civil position?" Ma Kongchuan finally said coldly, "Zhu Yu, you better stop before you go too far." "Humph." Zhu Yu retorted, "Without a pen, how can you call yourself a scholar? Are scholars so cheap? You're being unreasonable." Ma Kongchuan angrily said, "Liu Xiong wrote a poem on the spot to educate you. What kind of literary talent is this? You can easily get a literary position. If this is not a scholar, then what is?" "Ridiculous." Zhu Yu laughed mockingly. "Ma Kongkun, according to what you're saying, does that mean that all those who are literate in the central region are scholars? If you're a scholar just because you know how to read, then what's the point of having a civil position in the imperial examinations?" Ma Kongchuan pondered for a moment and couldn't refute. He used this method to agree with Chu Yang. In this way, without the barrier of a civil position, everyone could also call themselves a scholar. Because those literate people, no one dared to say that they didn't have talent. Chu Yang watched from the side for a while. Zhu Yu won and he couldn't help but feel happy. It was as if the cute silver was already waving at him. Of course, this was also the time for him to enter the stage. "Brother Zhu, right?" Chu Yang calmly and elegantly smiled. "I indeed don't have a civil position, but I can prove that I'm a scholar." He smiled even more happily and looked at Zhu Yu. "Won't it be fine if I beat you, a scholar? I challenge you, do you dare to accept?" Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but be startled. "Pa." Chu Yang opened his folding fan and elegantly waved it. He smiled in his heart, "Here comes silver." When Ma Kongchuan heard this, he couldn't help but smile. This was indeed a solution. Chu Yang didn't have a civil position, but if he beat someone with a civil position, then he would naturally be a scholar. Chapter 22-25. While Chu Yang and Zhu Yu were sparring, he didn't notice that there were two pairs of eyes staring at him. Qianzi. Viper. Seeing Chu Yang's performance, Viper couldn't help but doubt himself. He secretly asked Qianzi, "Is this really that dog? He's so talented in literary arts." "There's no mistake," Qianzi said with incomparable certainty. "We've cut off the space-time tunnel from the East Continent to the Central Continent. In this period of time, no one from the East Continent will enter the Central Continent. And for the past month, there's only this Liu Xuanhuan. Furthermore, that dog has such literary talent. This proves that he's that wild dog." Chu Yang was already extraordinary and incomparably amazing. He had amazing perception in martial arts, so what was so difficult about literary arts? Viper nodded. his heart also becoming more certain. Then he asked again, "When do we make our move?" "We still have to wait for a while." Qianzi frowned. "A month ago, what happened was too shocking. This place has already caught the attention of the big shots in the heavenly spirit world. So if we use 20 saints to openly kill the wild dog, it will definitely attract their attention. I'm afraid that they'll misunderstand and think that we're stealing that heaven-defying treasure. If that were to happen, then it would be troublesome. Even if they succeeded in killing Chu Yang, they'd probably be dug out. Heaven's whale, this kind of thing was too inconceivable. But who had this kind of ability? According to the rumors, it was a supreme treasure that made Heaven's whale, but no one knew if that was the case or not. Viper nodded again. Suddenly, a thought popped into his mind. He exclaimed, "The person who caused Heaven's whale, could it be that dog?" This was a wild hypothesis, but Qianzi's pupils shrank. If it was really the wild dog that caused Heaven's whale, then the wild dog was too terrifying. Not to mention 20 saints, even 100 saints wouldn't be able to stop it. To make the heavens cry, what kind of ability was this? How shocking was this? However, the undeniable fact was that the time of Heaven's whale and the time of Chu Yang's arrival in the central continent was simply too coincidental. "I don't think so. If it were him, we would have died long ago." Viper agreed with Qianzi's final judgment. However, the possibility that Chu Yang was the one who had caused Heaven's whale still existed in Qianzi's heart. He just couldn't believe it. When Zhu Yu heard Chu Yang, a lowly commoner, issuing a challenge to her, she almost exploded in anger. She clenched her teeth and her crazed expression became even more intense. "Lowly commoner, you dare to challenge me? You don't dare." Chu Yang gently fanned himself and smiled. "Don't worry, I won't bully you. You can choose any of the poems, calligraphy, painting, zither, or chess. If you can win against me, I'll let you do whatever you want with me." "You sure talk big." Zhu Yu roared. She opened her mouth wide as if she wanted to swallow Chu Yang whole. After Ma Kongquan heard this, he was slightly surprised. He couldn't help but size up Chu Yang again. It wasn't easy for someone to be proficient in both the poems, calligraphy, painting, zither, and chess. He knew he didn't have such ability. "You don't have to care if I talk big or not. I just want to know if you dare or not." Chu Yang closed his fan and said to the crowd, "If he doesn't dare, can we assume that he knows he can't beat me? Can I call myself a scholar? Although this isn't good, I still have to prove myself if I call myself a scholar." Everyone couldn't help but nod. They agreed with Chu Yang's words. Chapter 22-26. Lowly commoner, what are you being so arrogant for? Zhu Yu was on the verge of bursting out of her lungs. Her anger had also reached its peak. At this moment, if he was not in front of others, he would have torn Chu Yang to pieces. "We need one more." Li Dazhuang watched from the side and sneered in his heart. He knew Chu Yang's tricks very well. "You think the loudest person is right?" Chu Yang smiled and said disdainfully, "Give me a straightforward answer. I'll let you choose your own poem, calligraphy, painting, zither, and chess. If you are still not confident, then I'll let you do as you please. I'll play whatever you want." "Lowly commoner, how dare you?" Chu Yang was already too lazy to pay attention to him. He continued to fan himself. He had the upper hand in the bet. Zhu Yu knew that if he did not dare to compete with Chu Yang, he would be looked down upon by others. He could not accept this. He did not believe that Chu Yang had much ability. "Fine, lowly commoner, I'll lower myself and compete with you. Let's make a bet." Chu Yang succeeded but was not surprised. He showed the silver in his hand. "Although it's not much, it's all I have. Do you dare to bet? 1 to 100? Zhu Yu gritted his teeth and said, "If you win, I'll give you 100 silver. It's enough for a lowly commoner like you to squander." 1 to 100? I overestimated your magnanimity. Chu Yang muttered to himself and then said to Ma Kongquan, "Brother Ma, although I'm a little presumptuous, I really lack silver. Can you lend me some?" Ma Kongquan laughed and said loudly, "Brother Liu, I'll lend you 10,000 silver. Is that enough?" 10,000 silver multiplied by 100 would be 1 million silver. What a huge bet. Hiss, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Li Dazhuang's eyes also lit up. He knew that he could get some information from Chu Yang. Many. Chu Yang smiled and said, Brother Ma, a gentleman's desire for wealth is justified. I took a shortcut, which is not desirable. However, I still need to teach someone a lesson. One lesson for two is enough. If this was known by the parrot would laugh at Chu Yang to death. When did you become so kind? The reason why Chu Yang did this was because he was worried that Zhu Yu wouldn't be able to fork out that much money. Moreover, if the bet was too big, Zhu Yu's family would go all out against him. This wasn't something he wanted to see. Money didn't matter, as long as it was enough. A gentleman loves money, but he takes it in a proper way. After Ma Kongquan heard this, he cupped his fists and said, Brother Liu has learned a lot. Then I will lend Brother Liu 100 taels of silver. Thank you, Brother Ma. Lowlife, have you had enough? Zhu Yu fiercely clenched his teeth and with a crisp ka sound, he opened his mouth and said, Let's compete in poetry, using spring as the theme. He spoke very quickly, as if he couldn't wait to cut Chu Yang into pieces. He wanted to end the competition in the shortest time possible. As for using spring as the theme, the scope was too wide. The crowd immediately began to discuss. At this time, Zhu Yu had already blurted out, The plum blossom is ruined, the fragrance of the jade remains, the willow has not opened its golden eyes. The east wind is harmonious, the peach and apricot blossoms are torn apart, it is appropriate to sing about the arrival of spring. Fast to the extreme. The moment the topic was set, Zhu Yu had already composed a poem. It was extremely shocking, causing the crowd to exclaim, So fast! Is this Zhu Yu? Unbelievable, Zhu Yu is a hedonist, but after all is said and done, he is still a scholar. Zhu Yu is still an elementary scholar, but not every elementary scholar can be like him. That's extraordinary. I'm afraid that refugee is in trouble. When Zhu Yu heard the crowd's discussion, he immediately smiled. When he saw that Ma Kongquan was also shocked, he couldn't help but feel even more proud. He rushed towards Ma Kongquan and said, Ma Kongquan, how is it? I'm afraid your 100 taels of silver will be wasted, haha. Chapter 22-27. Lowly Commoner, what do you think? After seeing Chu Yang, all of Zhu Yu's happiness disappeared. He said in a sinister voice, If you lose, I promise I'll make you wish you were dead. In the next moment, he suddenly became playful and laughed. Lowly Commoner, take your time to think, don't rush. In the end, not everyone can be like me. He was a little neurotic, and his mood was unpredictable. Li Dazhuang was shocked. This idiot is not simple. He was a little worried about his money, so he asked, Fellow Daoist Liu, if you can't do it, then hurry up and give up. Chu Yang only smiled. Facing Zhu Yu's smug expression, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl into a disdainful smile. He directly said, Sleeping in spring, not knowing the dawn, everywhere I hear the birds, the wind and rain at night, how many flowers fall. When his voice fell, the crowd couldn't help but become silent again. The refugee actually made a poem in an instant. Zhu Yu's playful smile disappeared in an instant, and his expression turned sinister. This lowly commoner, how can he be like me? With such talent, how dare he steal my prestige, his courting death? Even though the refugee was able to compose a poem in an instant, his poem seemed to be a little lacking. I could still understand it. I can also understand it. If that's the case, Zhu Yu is better. What else is there to say? That must be the case. The central state is the central state, after all. This is the center of the heavenly spirit world. How can an outsider compare, especially when it comes to literary arts? The discussions of the crowd made Zhu Yu, who was gritting his teeth, immediately become overjoyed. He was extremely happy, and he sneered at Chu Yang. Lowly commoner, did you hear that? Whoosh. He moved in front of Chu Yang, pointed at Chu Yang's nose, and said sternly, although these people don't like me, they still have to admit my talent. Who do you think you are, to dare to compare with me? Chu Yang wanted to move his finger away with his folding fan, But that finger didn't move at all. That pair of sinister eyes were extremely vicious. It was as if Chu Yang had killed his father. Chu Yang couldn't help but sneer. Is your standard that bad? Did I really come up with such a poem for nothing? Ma Kongchuan, who had been immersed in the poem and savoring it, suddenly clapped his hands and exclaimed, "Good poem. It's really a good poem." He immediately looked at Chu Yang with great admiration. "Brother Liu, your song has really reached the level of purity. I admire you." Any praise is an insult to Brother Liu. Everyone was stunned. What was so good about this song? Zhu Yu also sneered. "Ma Kongchuan, aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others for spouting such nonsense? Such a simple and easy to understand poem, what's so great about it? You even know how to understand simple things." The admiration on Ma Kongchuan's face instantly turned into a sneer. It's because it's simple and easy to understand that it's difficult. He became more and more excited as he spoke. This poem only has 4 lines and 20 words, but it's written with many twists and turns. The language is simple and easy to understand, and it's natural. There's no trace of artificial carving at all. It's like the sound of nature. Reading it is like drinking wine, and you won't feel intoxicated. Let's not talk about that. Is your poem as catchy as Brother Liu's? I can almost remember it after hearing it once. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but be shocked. They felt that it was true. Zhu Yu naturally felt it too. Ma Kongchuan, no matter how good your words are, the Book of Songs and the Book of CI will naturally judge whether a poem is good or bad. If I can make the Book of Songs appear, can a lowly commoner do it? Buzz, buzz, buzz. With a light sound, an ancient book appeared behind Zhu Yu. As it flipped, many poems were revealed. How is it? Ma Kongchuan, what else do you have to say? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.